You want me to do the Open Public Meetings Act, or do you read that, Kathleen?
I do that. I usually do that.
I get
Okay.
all the different boards, so you go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 23rd, 2021 Historic Preservation Commission meeting. This is a remote meeting using Cisco WebEx. It's open to the public and will be televised on TV 34 and the Montclair government YouTube. Public can participate in the meeting via computer or phone. And to participate by phone, please call 1-408-418-9388 and enter the meeting code 179-521-1974. As mentioned, this is a regular meeting of the Montclair Historic Preservation Commission. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and by sending a copy to the Montclair Times, the Star Ledger, and the Herald News. Janice, could you please call the roll?
Okay. Chair Bennett.
Present.
Vice Chair Heineman.
Here.
Mr. Rooney.
Here.
Mr. Greenbaum.
Here.
Ms. Kane Levy.
Here.
Mr. Reinitz.
He was excused.
Okay. Mr. Graham.
Here.
And also in attendance is our historic preservation consultant, Tom Conley, our attorney, Ira Karasik, and our secretary, Janice Talley. Now, if anyone is watching, there have been 2 changes to the agenda tonight. Application HPC 2021-38, 205 Glenridge Avenue, Esquire Construction LLC, an application for total demolition of a historic property, of a historic structure, the applicant is asked to carry this to the October 28th meeting. And also application 2021-54, 560 Valley Road, Bank of America, applicant for new signage and facade changes in the Upper Montclair Historic District. The application has been carried to the October 28th meeting. So if anyone is here waiting for those to be called, you have the evening off. Okay, now moving forward, our draft minutes of the August 26, 2021 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to view the minutes, and are there any changes or changes to the minutes?
I do not see any.
I didn't see any.
I just have a question on 18 Warfield Street. I know that we had was that Warfield Street? No, I'm sorry. It was application 13 Wheeler Street. It was the application for total demolition. Mm-hmm. There was a discussion at the end about it coming back to us for the design of what will be placed there. But I believe, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, that would be handed back to us anyway for the design. Is that true? Is that right, Janice?
Well, okay, see, there's no, that was a demolition. All right. So there's no design associated with the demolition permit. They have already filed with the Board of Adjustment, the plans to build the houses, the 2 houses, and those will automatically go to you anyway. So there was no need for that.
But Janice, we were on to piggyback off the chair's point. I believe Mr. Reinitz last week had requested clarification as to whether we would get an opportunity to review the new design that was going to be put forward, and I believe the answer was yes. I think there was a legal technicality. Why though?
Because they're seeking a variance.
There's a variance, right?
Right.
So we will get an opportunity to review, but it is not necessary to put in the minutes. Is that the the discussion right now, or in the resolution?
Right. It's already filed with the Board of Adjustment, so it's
will be coming before our committee.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to make sure because we always have our last condition is the applicant should return to the HPC for final approval of design and material. So I just wanted to make clear whether or not that should be added. So if that should not be added, then
No, it shouldn't. I don't believe it should be added, Chair, because either they're required to come back or they're not required to come back, depending on what the criteria are. They put it in other words, if they were demolishing a building and there was absolutely no other reason, in other words, wasn't in a historic district or anything, for this commission to have jurisdiction. We can't just claim jurisdiction unless there's a statutory basis. But in this particular case, there is. So consequently, anything that's going to be built there is going to be referred to the Historic Preservation Commission for comments. So that's why it will come back. You will have the opportunity to comment, but no, you couldn't force them to come back if the law didn't require them to come back, regardless.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
Motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I guess I should abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. Yes, okay, thank you. At this point in time, if there's any public comment, anyone in the public that wishes to speak at this time, please call in and Janice will unmute you.
Okay, does anybody in the public have comments that they want to make? No, okay. I don't see any comments.
You don't see any? Thank you, Janice. As there are no public comments, this portion of the meeting it will now be closed. Moving on to committee reports. Committee reports, revisions. I don't believe we had a revisions meeting this month. Minor applications met today. Jason, would you like to give a brief report on those applications?
Yeah, we met today. It was 3 sign applications. One for the former Pig and Prince restaurant at Lackawanna. One for 427 Bloomfield Avenue?
Yeah.
And then a third for Bellevue Avenue, the TS Moss site. Those were heard, and I believe all 3, Janice, correct me if I'm wrong, they're approved with some conditions.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Moving on to community outreach. We're working on a couple of grants, the residential guidelines, the supplement to the design guidelines. We're expecting a draft tomorrow, which I will then pass on to Janice and the committee. So that's moving along. The estate section, which is the intensive architectural study for the estate section, is also in the works. That must be finished by at least by Monday. So because all these deadlines are next Friday. So we're working on those too. And then our next upcoming grant for 2022, which is an intensive study of the Upper Montclair commuter district. Janice has been working on that. So would you just like to tell us what the state of that grant, Janice?
My involvement has been getting the contract documents all set and sent to the state. So they had a deadline of Wednesday. They received all their documents, and so we will be finalizing at least the agreement we have our signatures they have to sign. And then once we have the contract, we'll be able to create the RFP and go through the process of hiring a consultant. The entire project has a budget of about $50,000. So it's a big project.
It is a big project. There's over 300 properties that need to be surveyed on that as well. So I just asked if anybody else is interested in serving on this committee, which is the outreach committee. Get in touch with me because we could use some additional input on that. Okay, and then I don't think there's any other committees that people have any information about?
Mhm.
No? Okay, so moving on, old business, we have no old business. Going on to new business. New business, we will start with HPC application 2021-49, 109 Union Street. Private owner Stephen and Leah Meranus. It's the application for total demolition of the historic district. And everybody should have retained their information from last month. And if you didn't, Janice sent, it was in our packet this month as well. So is anyone here for this application?
I just want to make it clear, I never received the package.
Oh, David, you didn't receive a pack? Okay. Were you wait? But I sent a notice to everyone to look on the website. Were you able to get the information off the website?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
So Rich McMahon is here for this application. Rich, you need to turn your microphone on because I've made you a panelist. Miss Meranus, I've made you a panelist as well. Okay.
Am I
All
on?
right. You're on, Rich.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let me swear in. Is Ms. Morenos going to testify?
Yes, she is.
All right, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're going to give this commission is truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes,
And the gentleman who's in there with you, is that Mr. Morenos by chance?
sir.
Are you going to say anything, sir?
No, sir.
Okay, I was going to swear you in as well, but okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, and we also have Mr. Paul Beck and Mr. Scott Higgins waiting in the wings, as it were.
Okay, I will make them panelists as well. So
All
Mr.
right, why
Higgins,
don't we swear them as well now so we don't get interrupted?
okay, Mr. Higgins and Mr. Beck, I've made you panelists. You need to turn on your microphones and also turn on your cameras because we do need to see your faces. Okay, Mr. Higgins has his microphone on.
Mr. Beck
And how
has
about
his
Mr.
video on.
We've got Mr.
You both on?
Mr. Beck, we don't have your microphone on yet. Okay.
Okay,
right.
and Mr. Higgins, Mr. Beck, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're going to give this commission is the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And that's Mr. Beck who said I do, Paul Beck. And Mr. Higgins, did you say that as well?
I do.
All right, fine. And just state your name so we have it.
Andrew Scott Higgins.
Thanks so much. Okay, I'm done with this.
Okay, thank you. This application is a resubmission of application for approval to totally demolish an historic structure that was reviewed in August of 2020. This revised application provides additional correspondence from PBA Engineering, ABS Environmental Services, and 2 letters from the general contractors. According to a little bit of the historic significance of the house, is this and of the district. This district is composed primarily of residences from late 19th and early 20th century and has its roots in the 18th century as the neighborhood was developed on farmland associated with initial settlement of the area in the 1740s. Union Street was also part of the Preservation Montclair, a townwide survey that determined possible notable architectural resources in the township. The properties along Union Street were part of the Phase 1 survey. 109 Union Street was one of the several properties surveyed. 109 Union Street is a 2.5 story Tudor Revival residence constructed in 1905. The building is a fine example of its type and displays typical features of the style, including unadorned barge board gables, half timbering at its upper stories, and brick at its ground floor level. Multi-light sashes and cross gable roofs. The building was expanded. One of the additions is to the west side and one is to the north side. According to the 1986 survey, which was conducted prior to these additions, the residence is a fine example of Tudor Revival architect and is one of the many similar houses found in Montclair. The house is an integral part of the neighborhood, which is a distinctive neighborhood due to its mix of residences of similar size and placement along the street, adopting the popular architectural styles of the period, such as Tudor Revival, Queen Anne, Shingle, and others. Many of the neighboring houses were designed by prominent local architects, and 109 Union Street works seamlessly with these known architect design residences. This is all from Mr. Conley's report, but it speaking to the significance, the architectural and historic significance of the house. So with that, may we hear from the first witness?
Thank you, Kathleen, and good evening, all. My client, Leah Meranus, has been waiting for well over a year to kind of take you through the nightmare they've been living regarding 109 Union. I'll just leave it at that. Leah?
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Leah Meranus, and my husband Stephen and I are the owners at 109 Union Street. Stephen and I first visited 109 Union for an open house in September of 2017. We immediately fell in love with the house, the neighborhood, the location, and less than a week later, we made a best of offer on the house. We were approved and we closed on our dream home in December of 2017. In March 2018, we began some construction of the house, which included finishing the basement, updating the primary bedroom and the third floor, and installing central air in part of the house, as there was no central air in the third of the home. We finally moved into the house Labor Day weekend 2018 with our two daughters, who were 1 and 4 at the time, while there was still construction in the home. A few weeks later, there was a leak from the third floor bathroom, which was undergoing renovation, into Ella, our oldest daughter's closet. The contractor chose to mitigate the moisture from the leak himself. He proceeded to remove large sections of the plaster wall and ceiling in the closet, and he set an industrial size dehumidifier with a large fan in our daughter's room. Skeptical of the contractor's work, my husband called Scott Higgins, an industrial hygienist, to make sure the leak was properly tended to. Scott came to our home that week and ran many tests. On Saturday, October 6th, I remember it vividly because we were at the Montclair Farmers Market at Walnut Street with our children enjoying a beautiful fall day. We got that call from Scott telling us that the plaster walls had been exposed and with the fans blew asbestos all over our home. He told us we should immediately evacuate. So we went home, grabbed a few things, and checked into our first hotel. We spent the next couple of months in various hotels, eventually moving into my in-laws' apartment, then moving into our own rental apartment, and ultimately into a rental house. To date, we have moved locations 6 different times and may have to move again come February. Following the leak, we filed a claim with our insurance company, and by year end, early January 2019, we were ready to start remediation of the home. Scott Higgins worked as a consultant alongside the remediation company that was assigned by our insurance company. At the end of January into February, we had multiple leaks due to freezing that caused further damage to our home. You may remember it was an especially cold winter that year, and we had no heat running through the home since there was no flowing air in the house for months. The first was a pipe burst in the primary bathroom that gushed through the floor into the first floor living room and all the way down into our basement. The water broke through a plaster ceiling, which subsequently also tested positive for asbestos. The leak ruined most of the flooring on the first floor, except the kitchen. Shortly after the pipe burst, there was a leak from the third floor office radiator that destroyed the walls in the landing between the first and second floors and the first floor hallway. After that, the second floor hallway bathroom radiator leaked, destroying the walls in the butler's pantry and the exterior of the home on the driveway side. We spent from January 19 to May 2020 attempting to remediate the home. The insurance company paid well over $700,000 for the work. In May 2020, seeing no end in sight, we mutually agreed to part ways with the insurance company. Per Scott's assessment, there was no economically feasible and safe way to fully remediate the home. We couldn't ensure a safe work environment for new contractors or builders, and we certainly couldn't guarantee a safe home for our family or our young children. Then in June 2020, we applied for a demo permit with the Montclair Historical Preservation Committee. We were ultimately scheduled for a hearing in early September. Due to a delay by the HPC that our attorney at the time believed had occurred, he suggested we not attend the hearing. That hearing proceeded and we were declined. For what it's worth, Stephen and I truly regret not attending that hearing. As Stephen was speaking to people and exploring further options for what we could do, he came across Rich, who mentioned that we could appeal to the zoning board, which we did. And a few days before we were scheduled on June 16th for a hearing, we were informed that there was a 20-day appeal window, which we were clearly past. So ultimately, we have been permitted to reapply for the demo permit, which we did in August, and which brings us here today. We fell in love with our home and this town at first sight. We had zero intention of knocking anything down when we bought the house. We have spent 3 years to date trying to create and provide a safe home for our children. We have spent 17 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to fix the house. We have moved our children 6 times. We have followed all the rules and have waded through all the processes while so many others choose not to. The house has been red tagged and deemed uninhabitable and an unsafe structure by the town. We have been told by experts that it is not economically feasible to remediate the house, and that based on the amount of damage already done and the inaccessibility to the friable asbestos between the walls, we can't guarantee that all the asbestos will be removed. It is not safe. Builders will not work in our home. Our children cannot live there, nor can anyone else's. This ordeal has caused significant anxiety, fear, and worry to me and my husband. It's caused unexplainable sorrow, frustration, and stress in our lives. It's displaced our children and deprived them of a home for most of their lives. We're asking you to let us move forward with our lives and start to rebuild. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Ira.
Yes,
I just make some comments just to make sure the record is clear. I do support allowing the commission to rehear this application. This was the first demolition application presented to the board after the commission, after the new ordinance was adopted covering the historic structure demolition. There was definitely a modicum of both confusion and misdirection. I wouldn't say misdirection in the sense anybody was given wrong advice, but it wasn't clear how to proceed. And I think this applicant, by the time it was figured out, it was too late to actually appeal to the zone board of adjustment, which was the remedy for a decision in this commission, if you disagree with it. So consequently, it's my recommendation, strong recommendation, that the commission hear this matter on its merits and put aside the issue of the fact that this had been previously brought before the commission and denied. It's true there was not a hearing. The applicant, as it appears to me at least, based on unwise advice, didn't appear. So with respect to that issue, I think we should I just wanted to clear that up on the record. And I do think the commission should proceed on the merits here. The second thing I would just want to ask Mr. McMahon is your client testified as to conclusions, or your client testified as to conclusions and information that was provided by Mr. Higgins, who was here. And I would just want you to confirm in testimony that she was accurate in what she said. And the commission can certainly ask Mr. Higgins questions to back that up. But I just feel so, just to remove the hearsay aspect of it.
Absolutely, Ira. Thank you.
May I ask a question, Mr. Krasik?
Yeah.
The ordinance which was written that I just want to be clear, has that changed at all? It sounds as though, I mean, you're saying that it was unclear. Has it changed since? I didn't read the ordinance for the demolition. Has that changed?
Well, the ordinance itself was a substantial change from the law before the ordinance was adopted. Right. And no, it has not changed since the original application was made. That has not occurred.
So within the original ordinance, it laid out clearly what the appeal process was.
No.
Well, I would take out the word clearly only because that's something which I heard from Mr. McMahon, who wants to argue. But it did say there was a provision, and there is a provision in the ordinance for what to do when you're dissatisfied with the result, which is to file an appeal within 20 days to the Board of Adjustment. In this case, if you recall, the applicant believed, at least, or took the position in court that they were entitled to an automatic approval as a result of the timing in which the board heard the matter. That single issue was heard by a judge, and the judge did not believe that was the case. So technically, they were not entitled to automatic approval. I mean, I make I'm advising and making recommendations if the commission feels like they had their shot. I mean, the commission can make that choice, subject, of course, the argument by the applicant. I just
want to make sure if it was the same ordinance that we were following. That's all. If there had been any changes to it. Okay.
No.
Thank you. Who else do we have to?
If I may, just regarding the ordinance and the appeal, and it's in H4. The ordinance does say you can appeal to the zoning board, but the 20 days is not there. The 20 days is in land use law, not totally disconnected to this ordinance. That's my point.
Okay.
So I read the ordinance. I said, oh, we can appeal to the zoning board. So let's appeal to the zoning board. And after I made the appeal, then I was referred to another land use law that says it had to be within 20 days.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
Are there other experts that are going to
Well,
testify?
Kathleen, before we move on to another witness, do we have questions for Ms. Meranus? I have a couple questions.
Should we do that now, or should we wait until everybody? Okay,
It would be appropriate to complete one witness at a time and, ask any questions of this witness
And before I do ask those questions, Ira, I just want to confirm with you, I did appreciate your comments regarding your opinion on whether we can hear this, but just so the other commissioners are fully apprised. Now, with respect to whether or not we hear this, this is purely within the discretion of the HPC. The fact that this is coming back before us, it wasn't a remand by the court.
No, the court case has never been resolved, actually. The only part of it that was resolved was that it wasn't, the applicant wasn't entitled to automatic approval. And it is within the discretion of the commission. I've given you my opinion, but you certainly have the discretion to say, we heard it.
But I think given the confusion of the attorneys on the call here, I think it makes sense to proceed with the, the process apparently was a bit confusing. I think it's reasonable to proceed and as if they haven't had as if it's a new application.
Yes, I tend to agree with that. I just wanted to make it clear that this isn't something that, we're not prohibited from hearing this because it came earlier, a year ago, but this is something that we can hear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. So we'll then start with questions for each witness. So does anybody on the commission have a question for Ms. Meranus? Jason?
I did. I wanted some clarification on something you said earlier about the costs to remediate after the initial leak that your insurance carrier paid for. You said it was about $700,000?
That's what they told us, yes.
Okay. Do you have any documentation that you could submit with that?
None that I can share.
Okay.
I have that documentation, but obviously I did not submit it.
That's fine. I think that's very relevant. I'd like that in the record.
We spent 17 months going back and forth with the insurance companies, with the insurance company trying to remediate the home. Scott Higgins is here to attest to all of the work that was done. He oversaw all of the work, and there was a significant amount of money. It is all detailed in our initial submission that even came through last year.
Any other more questions, Jason?
Were there any additional?
I'm under oath.
Were there any additional expenses after that? Because my understanding is this was before you applied for the demo permit, correct?
So we finished with the insurance company. We did everything that we could to remediate the home. We were then instructed by all of the experts whom you'll hear from today that there was nothing else to do, at which point we decided to submit for demo after going through over a year and a half of trying everything that we could.
Okay, so my question to you, so there's approximately $700,000 expended. If this demo permit was not granted and you were required to remediate further or do a partial demolition, that would be added cost plus reconstruction on top of the $700,000?
Everything is added cost from this point moving forward.
And did you expend any additional funds between the initial submission and coming?
All the rent that I have to pay. So I'm paying storage costs. I pay for certain security in the home. I have to pay for another house to get insured. I'm paying for rent. I have to pay for the water at the house. I'm paying attorney fees. Yeah, I'm incurring costs. I'm incurring costs every day that I'm not in my home.
So based on the information that you have, is it reasonable to estimate that if you are not able to demolish this structure, not only is there the risk that remediation would not be successful, but attempts to remediate could exceed the value of the purchase of the home?
It is my understanding, yes, that the cost to remediate the home, if it was even feasible, would far exceed the cost of the home.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Caroline, do you have any questions of the witness? You're muted.
I heard you say something to the effect that the town has issued an unsafe building order for this. Is that true?
It's red tagged.
Ira, what does that mean? Can you please explain that to us?
Well, red tag means it's a term which basically means that the house is unfit for habitation or that it's a dangerous structure. I mean, it could be a situation where it's in danger of collapse, or it could be a situation where it's uninhabitable because of mold, pollution, asbestos, things like that. But in any case, what it basically means is that people are not allowed to live in the house and inhabit the house.
As it is now. But it doesn't mean it's structurally unsound. We don't have that information from.
You'll hear from the structural
It
engineer.
could mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. In other words, there are other reasons why something would be red tagged besides structurally unsound.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Greenbaum?
Has there been any efforts to place the house on the market for resale?
I'm not interested in selling our property.
Thank you.
Mr. Rooney? Steve, I think you may be muted.
My question is, what makes this house different than other houses built in the same era? I'm talking about the amount of asbestos that was put in, which
I'm
was
sorry.
a common.
Are you asking Ms.
Is that a
Moranis
question for me?
or Mr. Conley?
I'm just asking this is what differentiates this house from anything else in that area?
In terms of asbestos or in terms of aesthetic, or
In terms of asbestos.
we have exposed asbestos in the home due
You
to,
do, but everybody else was built with the same materials. It was common at the time.
we had leaks. We had leaks in the home
Right,
and a mistreatment of that leak that caused the contamination of the home.
right. It's the
And then-
mistreatment of the leak.
Steve, I
Right.
think the witness really is not competent to answer that question about other houses.
We have the expert on asbestos.
Yeah.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to ask questions? I have a question if everyone's finished. On our application, attachment to application for total demolition, number 3 is good faith attempts to sell. Circling back to what somebody else said, it says not applicable. Could you explain that?
Yes, as I explained, I'm not interested in selling the home or the property. That's where we own the home and we own the property. We've spoken to real estate agents and you can tell me, what does that mean, a good faith effort to sell the home? I can, at what value and at what loss am I going to take for my property? It
Well, we
doesn't
don't.
seem reasonable. It doesn't seem reasonable to force me to do that as the landowner.
Well, Ira, could you explain what good faith effort to sell the home
Well,
is?
the purpose.
Means that
Is
being
that
that it's in the
is that a
ordinance?
requirement
Let me
of the
just-
ordinance?
No, Ms. Moranis, let me just answer the chair. Basically, the idea is that if there's a home with if there's a structure with historic value and If the owner doesn't want it and wants to tear it down to build something else. Now, I'm not talking about the specific facts of your case, Ms. Gross, I'm talking generally. If the owner wants to tear it down to build something else and therefore remove a historic structure with historic value, one of the questions that the ordinance asks or requires them to address is whether or not they've tried to sell it to somebody who will preserve the historic structure in order to maintain the historic structure. That's the reason why that particular, that question is on the application and it's in the ordinance. Take it as you will. I mean,
Ira, can I ask a clarification on that, Ira? Does that mean that does the ordinance, if the ordinance you're saying that is not requiring an attempt, the ordinance has us ask if there was an attempt? Is that what it
The
says?
ordinance makes that something that you should consider. One of the factors,
One of the factors,
many
what?
factors, you should consider in making your decision as to whether to allow the house to be demolished. It's a factor.
Isn't it a requirement based on these terms as it was written?
What?
Isn't it a requirement as part of the demolition application? Isn't the language, forgetting fact patterns?
Yes,
of this
it's
particular-
something that's
Factor.
being asked whether or not you've made efforts to sell the house. If you haven't, the commission can draw their own conclusions from that and use it.
We brought agents.
Any way they want.
We brought agents to evaluate it, and at the time, we did not deem that it wasn't something that we were looking to do. We would like to retain ownership of the property.
I also
Ms. Meranus, if I can ask.
I'm not suggesting it's unimportant. I'm just saying it's one factor.
As Mr. Karasik has mentioned, depending on the nature of the home, it may or may not be.
Ms.
I
Meranus,
also believe that the ordinance anticipates a typically fine house that may be a little bit dilapidated or whatever, not a red tagged toxic waste zone. It's how do you bring somebody into a house that's riddled with asbestos to look at?
So I think we need, excuse me, Mr. McMahon, we need to hear from the experts. I just wanted to be clear, the good faith attempt to sell, what if anything had been attempted? And correct me if I'm wrong, Ira, but I think the applicant is given a year to sell. Am I correct in that? I don't have the ordinance in front of me.
I believe there's a time frame, but
Right.
in terms of the applicant, and I'm not taking sides here, but the applicant has answered the question as to why she did or didn't make good faith efforts to sell.
No, but I just wanted to expand what the language is in the ordinance, if it is a year.
Well, then, if there was an effort, the way the ordinance is designed, that if there was an effort over a certain period of time, like a year, to sell the house and it wasn't, and nobody wanted it, then that factor would drop out as from consideration and would no longer be a factor to consider. That's the idea of having that time limit. It's just a way of which the factor would be eliminated as a reason why the commission would want to preserve the house. However, that doesn't seem to be the case here.
Yeah, if I may, the ordinance states that when there is a claim that there's no other alternative to demolish, the applicant shall provide written documentation of good faith efforts to sell the building at a reasonable and comparable amount, or to offer it without charge to purchasers willing to move the building to another location and preserve, rehabilitate, relocate, so on and so forth.
so that says shall.
Moran testified that she spoke to a broker, and
We spoke to 2 brokers.
and can you elaborate on or confirm whether or not they indicated you would be able to list and sell the house for a comparable price at what you paid?
Anything is listable.
No, but at a reasonable price, meaning
What's a reasonable price?
Well, that's something that we need to determine in our own judgment. So, Ms. Meranus, if I apologize, Jason, if you don't mind. I think what we're looking for is because the ordinance says shall, it requires some type of indication that an effort was made. If you met with brokers, I mean, that's up to our determination, our judgment to decide, I guess, if that was a reasonable attempt. And I think what we're just asking is, do you have any indication based on your conversations with those realtors whether the value of the home would have dropped by X percentage, or is there any indication you can give us that the home would have reduced by what mark?
I mean, it depends at the moment, you know, and again, it would be hearsay. So we spoke to brokers. You have to do it in good faith, right? If you go on the market, put a home on the market, and someone offers you your bid and you don't take it, is that a bad faith? Or what if I put it again? Or what if I put it on for a price that I think is worthwhile and no one takes it, and you deem that the price was too high?
So I'm not trying to be combative. I'm just trying to get clarification.
I'm sorry. I'm trying.
Yeah.
This has been an ordeal.
I understand.
I'm not sure. We have followed all the rules, and I don't think this is the spirit of the ordinance. We love the house. We bought the house because we loved it, and for all the reasons that were explained at the beginning. We have tried to go through this process in the best way possible, in an honest and genuine way forward, using experts and with the safety of our children in mind, and a desire to establish and settle a home in a town that we fell in love with, in a location that we fell in love with. So I'm asking the committee to think about the spirit of the ordinance and what it really means. Is it the people of the town? We have no intention of screwing up the town and putting up an eyesore. That's not what we're here to do. We've waited 3 years to live in our home. That's all we want to do. That's all we want to do.
Okay.
So I understand if this is going to be another, you know, we know that ultimately we can keep getting jumped down the road and it's another year down the road.
No, Ms. Meranus.
That's what's happening to your citizens.
We're acting in good faith. We're trying to get clarification.
I really hope so.
Okay.
Because we are too.
All right, why don't we,
On a
excuse me,
complicated application.
right, very complicated.
I have a
Any other
question.
questions for this witness, please?
I have a question. Kathleen?
Yes, go ahead, David.
So, in view of the fact that, and this might be tangential to our deliberation, but I think it'd be interesting to understand, in the course of your situation with the original contractor that caused damage that resulted in the exposure to the asbestos, was there any legal action taken against the contractor for negligence or anything of that nature?
We did. We filed against the contractor. The contractor filed for bankruptcy, both Chapter 11 and there's 7 and 13 or 11. He filed twice. He's gone. There's nothing.
Okay.
So yes, we did.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, David?
No, I just thought that was a piece of information that could be material in our discussion.
Thank you. Who else is here to testify? I
We
think
have
there's,
Scott Higgins, the asbestos expert, and Paul Beck, the structural engineer.
okay, Mr. Higgins, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You've been sworn, Mr. Higgins, and okay.
Mr. Higgins, can you just give a recitation of your qualifications and let us know if you are licensed in your field and if that's in good standing?
No problem. I've been in the abatement industry since 1989. I've done approximately, I was just doing some quick numbers, probably about 4,000 residential abatements over the course of my career. I am a licensed, New Jersey licensed asbestos contractor. I'm a licensed asbestos inspector in New Jersey and New York State.
Mr. Higgins, is your video on? your camera on?
We've had trouble with that. We can't get that connected. I apologize.
Okay. So can you tell us what your findings are with 109 Union Street?
Sure. Basically, unfortunately, they had an initial water leak, and the contractor tried to remediate it, and he wound up contaminating the entire house because they had the air conditioning heating units running while they were blowing the trying to dry this asbestos in the closet, and it wound up going all throughout the house. We did dust wipe samples inside the ductwork, and they were off the charts, like 100,000 fibers structures in these dust wipes. So also the big thing, they had another big water leak due to the cold winter. It flooded basically their master bathroom down, went right down through the first floor into the basement, causing all kinds of water damage to the floors, walls, ceilings, which all had asbestos plaster.
Scott, would you hold on? Janice, could we run the photographs of the interior while he's talking? Just kind of flip through them.
Okay, I will set that up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay. So basically, we came up with an abatement plan. A Molly was hired by the insurance company to remediate the house. And basically what that entailed was from the top to the bottom of the house, we had to gut all the plaster ceiling, walls, any floor material. We had to pull the wood lath off. We had to cut plumbing pipes out. We had to chop into all the old bathroom floors because they had pipe insulation running through. And basically we have it all stripped down to bare framing and the original subfloor. And what made this project so difficult is it's a balloon construction, which basically means you have these, like from the first floor, from the basement up to the third floor, you have these open cavities around the perimeter of the house. So when these guys were removing the asbestos, there was no way to control it. It would just go down, right down through the whole house. A lot of it wound up in the basement, contaminating their furnaces, and very difficult job. And we spent, I think, about a year or so trying to abate the property. The way it stands right now is there is still asbestos, there's encapsulated asbestos dust and debris that's stuck into these wood frame, the subfloors, which are tongue and groove, which expand and contract based on the humidity. So you cannot really get all of that stuff out of there, the dust and the asbestos fibers, without cutting all these wood plank floors out, which unfortunately they built the wood structure on top. So if you remove those, you would be impacting the structural integrity of the home. So that's pretty much why we had to stop A Molly. We couldn't go any further because they did not feel comfortable, and neither did we when we were overseeing the project, to have this home, structurally be impacted. So basically you have a shell of a house that's encapsulated with an asbestos encapsulant with asbestos debris hidden behind some plumbing lines that still are there, and in the subfloors, and you just can't get to it all, without really demolishing the house.
Okay, thank you. Does that finish your testimony?
Yes.
All right, we'll open up for questions. Jason, would you like to question the witness?
I would, but I'm going to pass for now. I'm still thinking.
Okay, Mr. Rooney? You're muted. Steve, you're muted. All right, why don't we go to Caroline while he figures out his system. Do you have any questions for the witness, Caroline?
Well, it's my understanding that asbestos, if it's encapsulated,
Right.
is safe. So why can't the woods will be encapsulated by any sheetrock or insulation or anything that's put there. It seems why the structure is sound, the walls are standing, the exterior envelope looks sound. Why can't you stop instead of keep digging into it and just and seal it all?
Well, am I to answer that, or?
Yes,
Yes,
Mr.
Okay.
Higgins,
Did you hear the question? She's asking about if it's encapsulated, why can't you do anything with it?
No,
Well,
it doesn't appear to be encapsulated yet, but why can't this be encapsulated?
Well, it is encapsulated.
I'm looking at bare wood.
That the picture doesn't, there's too much sun coming in that window, but it's encapsulated with a EPA registered asbestos encapsulant. All the wood framing was sprayed.
Okay, and then why can't sheetrock further enclose it?
Well, this whole house is totally demolished inside. They're going to have to bring in code upgrades. They're going to have to redo a lot of framing work in this place. And that's the problem. They're going to have a contractor come in here. They're going to have to disclose to him that there's a potential of asbestos exposure because they're going to be cutting into subfloors, moving walls, and there's asbestos dust in all these little nooks and crannies, the interstitial spaces. So you can't just go in and slap up insulation and sheetrock. They have to re-plumb this whole house. Most of the plumbing, the bathrooms were gutted. It's a shell. They're going to have to basically start over again in this house.
I'm confused because starting over is what a new house would be. It's just working with an existing frame. So I don't know. Every house in Montclair has a similar construction. All the houses that were built of this era, and so I'm not seeing. There was flooding all over town in the last couple of weeks. Does that mean that houses should be demolished all over town?
Well, that flooding came into the basements. This flood came up from the second floor and flooded the whole house it didn't come in from a basement. You would have to have like a tidal wave.
And plenty of houses have leaks as well.
Right, which they're probably addressed. But if they're going to do any kind of to get rid of all the asbestos in this house so the contractors can build safe, they're going to have to structurally secure and pin the building so they could cut out all this wood flooring and stuff that has asbestos dust still in it.
I think you're missing, Ms. Levy, that the asbestos in this house has been released. And like a lot of houses have asbestos tile, for example. And as long as the asbestos tile remains asbestos tile, the asbestos is not released. With the various things that happen, it has been released throughout the house between the fans and the floods, and it's everywhere.
But it's all gone now. I mean,
no, it's not gone.
No, it's not gone. That's the problem. We can't get it all out.
But what is remaining, someone can encapsulate it.
The encapsulation is, if you look at on the picture in front of you, there's 2x4s, and if you could see them in real life, they have kind of a white color to them. That is what's encapsulating it. But to build anything else, you're going to have to cut into that 2x4, and when you cut into that 2x4, you're releasing asbestos again.
Why do you have to cut into the 2x4s?
Because
the rooms remain the same. I mean, if those were the issues.
they're going to have to reconfigure all the wood framing. They're going to have to bring it all up to code. This is an old 1905 constructed house. They're going to have to move doors, reconfigure the framing, and that's going to release asbestos dust.
I don't understand, if I may, why do they have to move things around because of it being a 1905 house? What makes this not to code at this point? Why couldn't it be brought to code without disturbing cutting into the 2x4.
I would leave that to the engineer. I think he's on board.
Yeah, that would be Mr. Beck's realm.
Okay, okay, so do we have any further questions for this witness, Mr. Rooney?
I think Kathleen, Ms. Levy took care of that.
Okay, Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I think I'd like to hear the engineer's testimony.
Okay, and
before
Mr.
asking
Hyman?
another
Yeah,
any
before we
questions.
move on to the engineer, Mr. Higgins, can you just, for the benefit of the board, explain the difference between encapsulation in this situation where asbestos fibers are lodged within the structure itself versus a typical situation where there are asbestos materials in their original form?
Yes, like typically in the older homes, you have a thermal system insulation, which is pipe insulation typically, which everyone's probably seen in their basements if you have an older home. We can encapsulate that by wrapping that pipe insulation with a pipe lagging or spraying a special paint which penetrates and binds all the asbestos. And that's a temporary fix. It's not a permanent solution. So that's more of the encapsulant we did here was just to lock down fibers so we would pass an air test so we could release a moly from the project, since we couldn't really go any further and they didn't want to go any further because of the structural concerns.
Does that answer your question, Jason?
Yeah, so is it fair to say that in the typical case, the asbestos is localized to a specific area that you can address and then avoid when doing further renovations, whereas here, the asbestos is everywhere?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness?
I have a question for the asbestos professional.
Yes.
Am I correct to understand that your firm actually provides the services to do what would be required if this house was to have to be abated completely? Does your firm perform those services?
Yes.
And if you were to be, if they were in a position where they were forced to go forward with the abatement, what specific steps would have to be taken if you were to have, if the Meranus family chose to continue to restore the house and they hired your firm to do the abatement, what would you need to do?
I would have a professional New Jersey licensed PE would have to go in and support the shell of the house, the exterior walls, and we would have to cut all the wood framing out of this house from top to bottom.
But the wood framing is open. You're saying that your concern is the distribution of the asbestos particulates kind of in hidden spaces, but you're telling me you're going to have to remove the framing?
Yeah, because if you want me to get rid of we never say all, but asbestos where we know it is, some of this plank subflooring is, they built the house structural walls on top of the plank flooring, and a lot of the dust and stuff is in the plank flooring and the old bathroom framing, the floor framing, and you can't, that's structural. We can't cut that out without having the house properly supported. You can't get to it all.
I mean, I'm not an expert in this by any means, so help me understand. Is it kind of a vacuuming process of some sorts where you draw in the asbestos particulates into some kind of, vacuum type?
Yeah, we use the HEPA vacuum, high efficiency particulate vacuum. We've done all that. We had them HEPA vac and wet wipe, HEPA vac, wet wipe, all reasonably accessible stuff that we can get without dismantling anything further. We had them dismantle a tremendous amount of stuff to get to the bigger parts of asbestos that we saw during the abatement process.
Sorry to interrupt, but Janice, my client got knocked off the video and can't get back on. She needs access from you.
Kathleen, I have a question for Mr. Higgins.
Yes, who is that?
It's Tom Connolly.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, Mr. Higgins, in your memo that was dated May 27, 2020, you described the asbestos abatement that was done as being done very aggressively, and that action caused the fibers to fall into these spaces that we're discussing now.
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but I do recall that.
So it was done improperly?
I would have used improperly. Aggressively means the way you, basically this type of abatement is basically a controlled demolition by licensed asbestos workers. And they basically have to break the plaster with hammers, wet it down, break it, and put it in the asbestos bag. So doing that, you pulverize it and it just falls down due to gravity and goes all throughout these interstitial spaces in the perimeter of their house. Like I said before, it's all open top to bottom. We tried to control it. You just can't control it. We had plastic on the floors as much as we could, but you're taking ceilings and walls of plaster lath, which is basically turns in, when you break cement, the dust just goes everywhere. You can't control it from getting inside these spaces.
But we're talking about a few damaged areas, right, where water was coming in. So why would the whole house have to?
No, it wasn't a few. It was basically the air conveyance system. They had brand new air conveyance, which is HVAC units in the crawl space of the home. They had 1 and 2 in the attic, and all the ductwork ran through the whole house, and that was all contaminated. So they could not clean the ductwork, so they had to cut all the ductwork out of the house. So you had to cut into all the ceilings and walls. So we made a determination. It's better. You have to take all the plaster out of the house because you couldn't get to all this material. It wasn't like one water leak here. It was a major flood from the master bathroom down in through the living room and all wound up in the floors. It did significant damage, and the insurance company went in and assessed it, and they approved. They didn't push back on our procedures and scope of work. They agreed that that was the best way to handle this.
Okay, I have one other question for you, though. You described the framing of the house as being, I believe you said balloon construction. But then you went on to describe something that was more like platform framing. And I think in Mr. Beck's, the structural engineer's report describes it as platform, so I'm confused.
I think let him deal with that, but I know there are cavities that run from the 3rd floor down through the basement around the perimeter. It's a combination because they had renovations done. Their master bathroom is that's platform. The other all the portions of the house are balloon. It's a combination.
Okay.
Does that conclude your questions, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Higgins. We'll move on to the next witness, which I believe is Mr. Beck, the structural engineer.
Yes.
And we do have a report, I believe, in our, do we have a report?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Or you should.
All right, it's in here somewhere. I just want to make sure that we have the report.
We do.
So, Mr. Beck, can we, where are you?
Here. Can you hear me?
We can hear, there, now we
Yes.
see you.
want me to continue?
Yes, Mr. Beck, why don't you begin your testimony, please?
And just start with your background qualifications and licensing.
That's exactly what I want to do. I just want you to know, I'm a structural engineer. I have a firm that's been in business for 43 years. We do nothing but buildings. We do everything from residential buildings up to commercial buildings. And bigger than that is unimportant at the moment. I took a little read, and we have done over 300 jobs in Montclair since I started my business. A tremendous number of those involved residences throughout Montclair, and I certainly don't want to bore you with listing some of them. We are quite adept at evaluating all the framing that it takes to hold up a residence. We've worked on many, many 100-year-old houses, in some cases 200 years old. When I came into this building, I met with Mr. Higgins so that he could explain to me the extent of the spread of the asbestos. Mr. Higgins described this as a balloon frame residence. I'll pretty much agree with him, but I'll put a little tweak on it because it's not your standard balloon frame. When I saw the framing here, the base flooring continues across the entire floor, and the studs that hold up all of the walls, both interior and exterior, are resting on that flooring. So it's very simple that if you want to remove all the flooring, which is what is necessary to get rid of all of the material, you have to remove it from underneath the studs that are holding up the exterior walls, and in some cases, interior walls. Some of those walls are not wall bearing, but they're.
If I may, Mr. Beck, 1 second. If Janice, you can move it up to the pictures start with photo number 2, and they.
Well, if you look at photos number 4 and number 4, 5, and 6 in my report, hope that's coming out a little bit better.
There you go.
Number 2 shows it resting on planking. That's an interior wall. So if you just jump up to numbers 4, number 3 is similar. That's an interior wall. Number 4 is an exterior wall that was framed right above in the upper right-hand corner. That's a window. But you can see that all of the studs that form the exterior of the building are resting on the planking. So you can't just come in here and slide that planking out. Remember that everything was put together with nails. So now you have to pull out all of that flooring material, at which point there's nothing holding up the exterior walls. The vertical studs, as well as some of those horizontal pieces of blocking between the studs, are also impregnated with the asbestos. So the question was, well, what would happen if you were to say you have to preserve the exterior finish of the building? You would have to take those vertical studs, the horizontal studs, and I think if you go up to picture number 5 and 6, you'll see that there's a similar arrangement. There's planking going underneath. Number 6 shows you it's in an area where you see the studs form. The doubled studs are carrying headers above the windows. All of that is resting on the planking. So if you wanted to take that planking out and remove those studs, you would have nothing but the exterior face of the house that would be standing there, not attached to anything. Now, when the house was constructed, the exterior sheathing on the walls had to be nailed into those studs. So if you pull those studs away, aside from the fact that they're not going to be held up with any strength, you're just going to have nails sticking out towards the inside of the house. It's just no logical way that you can remove all that material and not have to remove the exterior facade. There's picture down, well, that's all the way to the basement. The picture number 13 shows that there's wood framing, as there is in almost all of these houses. Well, there's a fireplace. And that next picture shows the way the wood is framed around to hold up the hearth. You can see the red bricks, which are forming an arch shape. That's typical way that they built the hearths in those houses in those days. And I might offer the fact that they really undersized the amount of lumber that was there. That's why a lot of those hearths start to fall apart. In this case, if we wanted to remove that lumber, we're going to lose the hearth. The next picture down, number 14, you can see the plumbing, some of the plumbing that had been put in. And to answer, I forget whose question it was about, why would you want to disturb the floor joists? First of all, a lot of the floor joists that were in the bathrooms are no good anymore because they were put in with a cinder concrete, and almost all of the bathrooms have those little 1-inch square tiles which set on top of cinders. The tops of the floor joists were were shaved off to make a tapered shape so that they could fill that up with the cinder concrete and then put the tiles on top. So those floor joists are essentially worthless once they're exposed from a structural point of view. If you start to add pieces in there or try to remove those pieces, once again, you're losing strength from the exterior if the bathroom, which most of them do, come up to the exterior walls. Also, if you need to put holes through the lumber to put in pipes and things like that, that's going to expose whatever asbestos is still built into that lumber. There are other members in the basement that had been cut over the years to run pipes, electrical lines, and things like that. And those have all been compromised when you cut the chunk out of the bottom of a beam. That's one of the things that structural engineers just shudder about, because when plumbers come in and the electricians come in and they start chopping out the bottom of the beam so that they can run power lines or plumbing lines, they've just compromised the strength of the beams. Now, I didn't go through the entire house to try to look at how many of those beams had that in them, but if you go down to photos 15 and 16, you'll see that there are some chunks taken out of those beams, which, of course, depending on exactly where they're located in the span of the beam, if they're in the mid-span of the beam, that's the worst possible place. So what we're faced with here is an entire frame of the building that really needs to be taken apart. And if you do that, you have to take the facade off. There is no practical way to hold it up. Now, I've been asked questions before where they say, can you? And I usually stop them in the middle of the sentence, because the word can you, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't apply. You always can. But it's a little bit unrealistic because it would cost a fortune to try to maintain the exterior facade of the building while you ripped out the entire interior. It's just, we talked about what would happen if you tried to put shoring around the exterior of the building like you see in Manhattan when they put all of those platform frames up to try to hold things together while they redo it. It's just not a practical solution when you have to take out all the supporting elements. So this is one of the very, very few times that I have ever walked into a house and said, this is something you don't want to fix. An infinite amount of money can do anything, but that's just ridiculous.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beck. Does that conclude your testimony?
I think I've covered everything.
Yes, I've been following along with the letter that you've written, so thank you. We'll open it up to questions now from the commissioners. Mr. Hyman?
Yeah, Mr. Beck, following up on your last statements regarding the economic feasibility of trying to preserve the external facade, can you give us an estimate in terms of, a rough estimate in terms of dollars, of what the cost of that undertaking would be?
It's my policy.
To preserve the facade.
It's my policy not to throw numbers around, and for a very simple reason. Our businesses are primarily driven by labor. The cost of labor usually is greater than the cost of the materials. Now, unfortunately, we're talking about having had 2 years worth of COVID, and for anybody that's not aware, the prices of materials have gone out astronomical. The beam that was bought, or the stud that was bought in Home Depot for $3.50 is out there selling for about $11.50. The cost of the lumber to go into this house would easily be 3 times what that cost would have been 2 years ago. That's not even to mention exterior facades, floorboards, which under the to replace the planking that's there in today's market, you would use plywood. Plywood has also gone extremely through the roof. And then the labor that would be involved to exercise all these things is just out of sight. To try to put people up there to take the material out and then try to go back and put material back in again, even if you could hold the exterior facade, I think it would easily exceed whatever they paid for this house. This is just a terrible mess.
May I expand on the question? Jason, are you finished with your question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my question, building off that, so you've now just opined about the costs of construction, the cost of labor and the cost of materials. But wouldn't it be safe to say that if the house was to be demolished and to be rebuilt, wouldn't we basically be talking about effectively the same or perhaps the same costs? So if we're looking, if we're trying to make this an economic comparison, okay, apples to apples, the economics of demolition versus the economics of restoration, abatement and restoration. If you take out the abatement part, wouldn't you say that the cost of restoration would probably be less than the cost of reconstruction?
Not really, because what I was talking about was the cost of taking the building down first and then rebuilding it.
Right. So
the demolition comes a lot easier than trying to fix it.
Right, but so if you were to there's two basic premises, two basic propositions in front of us as at the present time. I'm not going to parse and say there's a third option, but at the moment, but that might be a case. But there's two propositions. One is the demolition of the building, which would involve the cost of demolition, the cost of removal of the materials being contaminated, potentially increased cost because of that, etc. Versus the second option is and we're going to hold the abatement costs separate from now. The cost of just restoration in kind to its original condition, and obviously improved because it's new materials and it's updated. But effectively, those are the two economic costs. But I can't imagine that they would be that far apart.
Well, I think, David, maybe that's something that, considering the vagaries of construction materials, that Mr. Beck is not prepared to answer that at this point.
It's just conceptually, I can't, if we're gonna look at it, again, we're not necessarily here to look at it purely on an economic basis.
Right. Yeah,
So,
no,
but
we're here we have certain criteria that we're looking at it. And your point is well made. Let's see if we have do you have any other questions for the witness? Otherwise, we're going to move on.
If I may, while we're still on this subject, Mr. Beck just testified at length about how difficult, if not impossible, or certainly very expensive, it would be to maintain the facade and reconstruct the house.
That's what I was going to
versus demolition, which is relatively cheap, even using the appropriate asbestos remediation. You wet it down and knock it down and have the right people move it away. I mean, he can answer the question, but
Well,
I think it's a significant difference in the cost involved.
if I may, let me just point out an item of difficulty. If you have a stud, the vertical stud that is holding the facade up, and you take that stud away, as I said before, you're now left with nails poking inside the house. You can't take a stud and just jam it on those nails. So you put the stud next to the facade. You now have to go outside and nail it back to the new stud you just put in. So you're going to destroy the facade by putting nails, and I'm just using nails for a simple example, putting nails through the exterior facade and making a bunch of holes in it to attach it to the new studs that you put in. So now you have nails exposed on the outside of the house. This is not the way a house is built. The house is built with the sheathing put up first, and then it's covered with the facade. Here we have a facade that's already there. We're going to destroy it by putting nails through it and then try to patch it back up again. This is just a tremendous amount of work that's totally impractical.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Can we move on to Mr. Graham? Do you have any questions for the witness?
No, that clarified what I was going to ask. I just wanted, I guess, if I could, Mr. Beck, the process you're describing of trying to maintain the facade just is far more labor intensive, far more meticulous, far more difficult than simply demolishing the building and rebuilding. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That's just what I wanted to clarify.
I'll
Thank
stop because I can do hours on this, but that's what all my years has brought.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rooney, do you have questions?
I have a question, and I don't know if it's for Mr. Beck or Mr. Higgins, but of the existing materials making up the building, is any of it salvageable, reused?
What kind of materials?
Well, I'm looking at, right now, I'm looking at floor joists. I'm looking at bracing. I'm looking, you're saying that the flooring is completely bad, so we get rid of the flooring. But I mean, there's studs, there's joists, there's everything. And this is probably old growth wood. And thinking that maybe you could reuse it in this building, or it might be salvageable for resale. Is this possible?
Based on doing the asbestos abatement and the potential of asbestos being still on there but sealed and encapsulating the liability, doing that, I would not recommend it.
Okay.
Well, if you were going to rebuild this house again, you wouldn't necessarily use the solid members that you're looking at. There are those eye joists, there's open trusses, there's a whole world over there of other materials that can be utilized to make it more efficient.
Right.
Also, I don't want to be accused of trashing older buildings, but the lumber, when it was put into these older buildings, was not graded the way lumber is today. So in a lot of situations, these beams have knot holes down at the bottom where cracks develop. I could go into these older homes and spend a half hour pointing out bad framing.
And this is I was just thinking of this as maybe reusing existing materials where possible could bring up its lead rating for the building itself by reusing. It may not be financially possible, but I'm just throwing it out there.
I wouldn't suggest anybody take 100-year-old lumber and reuse it unless they were just using it in their fireplace.
I'd like to make a comment. In my house, my 100-year-old lumber is far more successful than the new addition we put on 30 years ago. So I think that old lumber is much more, but that's just an aside. Can we move now to, who else has a question? Caroline. I think you're muted, Caroline.
I don't really have a question.
Okay, I have a question. You're on your letter dated July 23rd, 2021. The last paragraph you have is not economically feasible to attempt to repair the structure or save the facade in its current configuration, as an overwhelming amount of material will have to be removed and disposed of in accordance with environmental requirements. But wouldn't that be the case if the house was demolished?
Yes, you would still have to take that material and dispose of it. Mr. Higgins can speak to that more than I can, but obviously, yes, anything that still has asbestos on it would have to be segregated and thrown into the appropriate dumpsters, which go, I don't know where. Mr. Higgins, you know where they go, but.
Yes, Ohio or Pennsylvania.
I guess I'm not
Okay.
hiring
One
there.
thing we don't keep in New Jersey, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other question? I can't see who's speaking.
Tom Connolly.
Yeah, okay, Tom, go ahead. You have questions for Mr. Beck?
I do. If we take the asbestos out of the equation for right now, would it be possible to structurally upgrade this house to meet current code?
How can you take
Yes,
asbestos out of it?
you always can.
Okay.
You know, typically, again, that we go by today's standards. Most of the houses were framed out on their floors with 8-inch deep members. They usually weren't spaced at 16 inches on center like we do today. They were spaced usually at 18 inches, in some cases even 24 inches on center. And a 2x8 in a typical old house is spanning 15 or 16 feet, which again is a real no-no in today's world. We only go about 12 feet with 2x8s. So you start dealing with all of these different things. The bathrooms, as I mentioned, tops of the beams are chamfered so that they can fill in with the cedar. I'm sorry.
It's a deepened floor. I'm familiar with it.
So when you start picking out all the pieces you need to take out, those that have been chopped up over the years because of rogue plumbers that have been chopping holes through the beams and everything, you're going to start removing a large amount of lumber just for that.
Well, why would you remove it? Couldn't you just sister the existing members that are there that are damaged?
Then you can start to have problems having enough room between them. It's, yes.
20 inches on center, yeah.
The short answer is yes, you always can sister another member next to them. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily want to leave what's there.
But if we're trying our best to save a historic structure, it could be done.
Again, anything can be done.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Any other questions for Mr. Beck from our commissioners?
No.
No, okay, so Mr. Conley, you have a report which I read from quite extensively concerning the historic nature of the house. Could you go over some more of the details?
Actually, I think we touched on pretty much all of the concerns that I had in the memo. The one concern I like Yeah, literally every one of, I think we touched on. Good faith attempt of the owner to sell the property. I had a question for Mr. Higgins about, the feasibility of demolishing the structure. We talked about, and I think that was, and just one or two questions for the structural engineer. I think that was pretty much the concerns I had. But I have an additional question, but we'll wait till the end.
Oh, why don't you ask it now?
Okay.
Is it
So-
to Mr. Beck or who is it toward?
Mr. Higgins.
Mr. Higgins.
Yeah, I think this, if this project was planned out properly, if we knew exactly where, so if we were going to restore the building exactly the way it was, which I think is what our goal would be, if we planned out exactly where all the plumbing fixtures were going to go, all the new ductwork was going to go beforehand, and all the structural work, a asbestos company could come in and put holes in the members if they were planned exactly, in the members, structural members, and then all new finishes put back in to encapsulate the existing asbestos that is left in those spaces. And again, this is a question for Mr. Higgins. Would the house be safe to live in if all new finishes were put in and the asbestos would be essentially encapsulated? Would the house be safe to live in?
I don't know what would be left of the inside to bring it all up to code and with all new electrical, and I don't really, it's too open of a question for me. I don't understand what all the new construction would entail.
But that's what I'm saying. Somebody would have to plan this out beforehand, right?
You would have-
And the reason why I'm asking this question, because I've done it in historic structures that have asbestos in there. And asbestos was removed strategically in order to place new structural members and new HVAC systems and plumbing.
Right, if
And
that
the
was
finishes
done
put
from
back.
the beginning, if it was done from the beginning of their renovations, yes, but it was not accomplished.
Yeah, but you've
that way.
encapsulated all the asbestos now, right, by spraying the material on.
Well, we couldn't even get to where the encapsulant is. I mean, where the asbestos is. We only got on the surfaces of the wood framing. We couldn't get down into the nooks and crannies, interstitial spaces. And remember that wood, the biggest problem is the wood contracts and expands during the temperature changes. So, one day it looks, oh, we got everything, we vacuumed it. The next day it dries out, and you have the wood, contracts, expands, and you can get a little bit more of the dust and stuff out. But we got as far as we could really get to.
But once all the new finishes are put back in, would the house be safe to live in?
I couldn't answer that.
I have to.
All right.
So Tom, any other questions?
I do not have any other questions.
Okay. Any other questions? We're going to open it up to the public for questions. Nobody else has a question, not discussion.
I have some questions of Mr. Conley.
Okay.
Okay. Just very, very quickly, Mr. Conley, your report mentions that it's a Tudor Revival architecture, one of many similar houses found in Montclair. So it's not particularly unique to Montclair, correct?
No, but in this district, it's a particular example for this district.
Okay, and speaking of this district, there are designated historic houses in the district, but this is not one of them, correct?
As part of a district,
I understand that, but
properties that are, it's listed as a contributing resource. So properties that are a contributing resource in New Jersey, registered historic districts are classified as historic structures.
I understand
yes,
that, but
this
it's
is
not
a historic structure.
specifically listed as an historic structure, correct?
It is. It would be as part of the district.
It is. It's listed as a historic structure within the district. I think what maybe you're trying to point out is that we don't know who the architect is, but there are enough similarities between other houses within that neighborhood that we have a suspicion who it might be.
Okay, which brings me to my next question is that the houses in the neighborhood were designed by prominent architects, but we don't know who did this one, and it may or may not be a prominent architect.
It's a moot point because no matter what house we're talking about in this district, it is a historic property.
May I ask a question to Tom Connolly? How do you measure the fact that there's a sister house next to it that probably, I would imagine, with a high degree of confidence, was designed by the same architect, but probably built it exactly at the same time?
Yeah, you can't assume anything unless you have an absolute fact.
Proof.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions, Mr. Mahon?
It's McMahon.
McMahon, sorry.
Mr. Conley, have you visited the house? Have you looked inside the house?
I have not been inside the house. I've only viewed the house from the street.
But wouldn't that have been helpful in making your assessment?
To be inside the house?
Yes.
I think the photographs you provided allowed me enough to understanding of the house.
Okay. Thank you.
Janice, can we open this up now to the public? Does the public have any questions of the witnesses?
Yes, I do.
Who's that?
My name is Frank Rabacki.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabacki.
Just some technical issues as far as the process.
Mr. Rabacki, can you just please put your name and address on the record, please?
Oh.
Sure. My name is Frank Rabacki, R-U-B-A-C-K-Y, 398 Upper Mountain Avenue, Montclair. Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead. Questions for the
So I saw the agenda and this was listed as a new item, new business. And I didn't know if demolition permits require, or HPC permit hearings applications require notice of neighbors, 200 feet. Ira,
that's a good question.
It does not.
I don't believe the ordinance says it's not covered directly under the municipal land use law, though it is authorized by the municipal land use law in our opinion, this ordinance. I guess planning's taken the position that it's not, and there's nothing specific in the ordinance that requires notice. But I do think, I'd have to go look at it to see if when there is a demolition it does require an application. I don't believe that it requires notice, Frank.
the reason why I bring it up is, well, there are two reasons. One is because at the time you crafted the demolition ordinance, you had referenced that you based it on a particular way the MLUL was written and took advantage of that, and that was your justification for crafting our ordinance the way it was. So, yeah, whatever the ordinance says. So the neighbors don't have to be noticed, basically.
But not all applications under the municipal land use law qualify as development applications.
Okay.
You know, that's the thing. Different kinds of. But yeah, it was grounded in the municipal land use law for its authority. That's correct.
Okay. And then the other question is for you is what was the, or Mr. McMahon, what was the clause in the MLUL or the demolition ordinance or whatever ordinances we have on the books here that allowed this to be brought back as new business before the HPC?
Ira answered that up front.
I didn't hear the answer. I'm sorry.
Ira?
Well, let me ask the question.
The answer wasn't based.
Mr. McMahon, what was your basis for bringing this back as a new application? What part of the law were you citing to justify a new application? So it's to you instead of Ira.
My clients were never heard on the original application. As we went through earlier, we read the statute. It said you could apply to the zoning board for an appeal. It did not say in this statute that there was 20 days. That is land use statute. We got denied that. We discussed it. We said the best way to do is start over. So we're starting over.
But if you were denied, if your appeal, basically your appeal was denied. So
no, our appeal was not heard. We're starting at fresh. If we lose tonight, then we get to appeal it.
You guys made application. I'm sorry. You made application.
Let me just interrupt if you don't mind. I apologize, but I did lay this out, the whole issue of coming back to the commission after the original application had been denied. We did have a discussion of this earlier in the hearing. If you missed it, I'm sorry. I don't want to repeat it just because, you know, every time you repeat something, I'd rather if you read the record, but the ultimate result of that discussion was that it was discretionary with the board, in my opinion, whether or not to rehear this application. And I recommended, based on all the circumstances of the first one, that the board does rehear it, although it's within their discretion. That was the sort of bottom line, and that's I assume that.
So I got the sense of that this was something crafted between the lawyers as a way to deal with this issue, but my concern is that you, as a lawyer for the HPC, didn't have the standing to make that decision. That the decision should have been made by the zoning board lawyer or by the courts.
Well, I didn't have the standing to make the decision. The commission does. All I could do is
as a commission, yes, for the commission. But I'm just saying, since the administrative decision was to not allow the appeal, I'm just thinking what the township is effectively doing. It's like any other land use issue. You can't bring back the same issue again before the zoning board without fundamentally changing the application. I forget the name for that. And this is what you're effectively doing, is you're bringing the same application back. And instead of going through the zoning board where it should have gone, you're bringing it back through the commission. So that's my only point. You guys are going to do what you're going to do. But let me move on to the next question of Mr. Higgins. And that is, my concern, again, is the 200 feet or more around this property for the neighbors. And after hearing the testimony and the extent of the encapsulation that was temporary, but the release, according to Mr. McMahon, and generally it just sounds like a very horrible situation where the asbestos is permeated every part of the house in every possible way. The piping systems, the wood itself, the soil that's in the basement or the sub-basements or the exposed areas. So my question is, can Mr. Higgins describe how a safe demolition would happen for such a highly contaminated property? I mean, this is not like a guy throwing, taking a garden hose and spraying down the house while they demolish it with a crane. I mean, is it as simple as that, or is there something that's going to protect the neighbors and the parkland and the children's play areas and daycare centers that are in that neighborhood?
That's a good question. Mr. Higgins, can you answer that?
Yes, I'm not a demolition expert, but we have been involved in overseeing buildings and houses that are demolished with asbestos materials in them. And basically, the main thing is that the demolition contractor has to, they don't use a hose. They usually hook up to fire hydrants, or they basically soak the building and the structure and keep it no visible emissions during the demolition process. So most of the real heavy, dusty stuff sheetrock and the actual plaster has already been taken out under the interior part of the asbestos work. So this would more be a very controlled, slow, precise demolition using heavy amount of water to contain, to keep any visible emissions, to limit any emissions and we would run perimeter air testing during all phases of that demolition.
So let me just understand from an asbestos contamination point of view. You had said it was through the timbers and the joists and the woodwork and everything. So that process would not spread asbestos. That would actually contain the asbestos by spraying it with water on the wood?
Yes.
Okay. And then since it was going down all the, I think your platform or balloon construction that this house has, and basically the way you described it in a general sense, that this asbestos has all come down to the bottom into the basement. What kind of basement was it? Is it a finished basement?
It's finished with cement, with crawl spaces that have cement floors. There's no exposed dirt.
Okay, so there's no problem with the soil around the building. We could leave the soil totally intact if you did such a, there's no chance there's asbestos anywhere or outside the interior, that's gone outside the interior of the building or the interior of the building.
No.
The floors are finished and the walls are finished, so it's basically encapsulated. And then when somebody picks up this stuff, let's say with the heavy equipment, so you demolish it, you bring it down, and now you have to pick it up and put it in something to take it away, and that's not gonna create a problem.
No, it's gonna
close that area with a tent or anything like that. You just pick it up and put it in the dumpster.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. And then this is a question for the engineer. It's really, one was just a simple cost of demolition for a building of this size, and structure. How much would it cost? As everybody said, it was very straightforward, easy type of thing. So, I think a ballpark would be possible. And then, so do we have an answer to that?
I can't answer that question.
Mr. Higgins, can you answer it?
No, I'm not a demolition expert.
Yeah. So it could cost $250,000 or it could cost $1 million.
I can tell you what we've been quoted. We've been quoted $25,000 to $50,000 to demo the house.
That's it?
That's it.
I can't get asbestos taken off my pipes.
That's right.
And in my basement for $25,000.
That is what we've been quoted.
Well, that's fine, but the experts here have been doing it for 40 or 50 years.
You asked the question.
So
they're not demo experts. That's what we've been. That is why the comparable cost.
Okay,
is
but
what we've
going back to your
discussed and why
point
we
about
have the
hearsay,
experts.
unless you're submitting some kind of documentation, I'm sure you were quoted that. I just can't take it. Doesn't satisfy my answer. The other question for the engineer is, how does rehabilitating a house, an historic house like this in New Jersey, differ using the subcode, the historic house subcode versus the new building code?
Well, when you renovate an interior of an existing house, you're not doing it to the extent that you need to do it here. You don't take the studs away from the perimeter walls. You may open up things like, which we would have here, I'm sure. I didn't go through and measure every door opening, but there's a lot of old homes that have 2-foot wide doors. That's not permitted anymore. It's usually 30 inches as a minimum. Now I'm dabbling into the architecture, which I should keep my nose out of.
Okay, so but there is a difference. I mean, as an engineer, you're familiar with the historic subcode, and I would think that it was created in part to reduce the cost of renovating and restoring buildings. I mean, it wasn't there to increase the cost, and it wasn't there to maintain the cost. I think it was probably there to reduce the cost while maintaining the historic structure. So that's an important consideration in evaluating what can be done and what cannot be done in New Jersey on a historic house, as far as whether demolish it or not.
Well,
And so there's no so neither of you are in a position to testify to that.
you have a little mix up there. When the code was established, and New Jersey was the first state in the union that ever did establish that sort of a renovation and rehabilitation code. But when you go in the beginning of that code, it specifies very strongly what falls into the renovation and rehabilitation and what doesn't. And when you start to get to the point where you're renovating something on the order of what we're talking about, you're going to blow right past what the requirements are to stay within the renovation and rehabilitation code.
So you're saying that the historic subcode doesn't apply in this case?
It's not a
The
historic.
extent of the renovations would make it a moot point, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not a historical code. It's renovation and rehabilitation. And that decides when the floor steps have to be meeting the current code as opposed to what they were put in at many years ago. It's when clearances for 6'8" under a set of steps, so you can't bang your head on the floor.
You have to bring it up to code for fire and safety. I get all that. I understand hallways, steps. I'm familiar enough with the code. I am just asking, I'm not trying to dwell into the architectural aspects of the code. As you said, you didn't want to go there either. My question was simply, in evaluating whether the opportunity to rehabilitate versus demolish, would the historic subcode, which is the name I'm calling it, I know it probably has some name like NJAC 5-236 or something like that, but would it make a difference? Would it impact the requirements? So I'll just, and as I understood your answer was no, it's paraphrasing, it's a moot point. We would be doing so much that it would be a moot point. Is that a fair characterization of your thinking?
Yes, I believe so. The changes that would have to be made just to meet even the, well, as I say, I don't think you could fall into the category that's covered in the renovation and rehabilitation code.
Okay, so it makes that moot. You know, one way or another, it doesn't help in this case.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's it. My question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rebecki. Janice, is there anybody else? You're muted.
Is there anybody else from the public who wants to speak? You are unmuted now.
No? Okay. So the public comment for this application is closed. We'll have a discussion now. It's 9:30. I would ask that our commissioners, we've heard a lot of testimony. We're really here to review the demolition about this historic house and within a historic district, how much it adds to the neighborhood. We understand that there are economic considerations, and we've heard testimony from the owners and what they've gone through. So open it up for discussion.
If I may, before you do that, can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just looking at the criteria for total demolition, and I have three particularly in mind. G, the structural soundness, integrity of the building, structure, object, or site, and the economic feasibility of its restoration or rehabilitation, so it allow for reasonable use. This building is unsafe. The town has already red tagged it. It's unquestionably riddled with asbestos. H is the threat to public health and safety. Again, asbestos. And I, the technological feasibility of structural rehabilitation. You heard from Mr. Beck and Mr. Higgins just how impossible, well, you know, anything can be done with enough money, but practically impossible it is to do this. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Heineman?
Yeah, based on what I've heard and what's been submitted, you know, I tend to agree that looking at the criteria of the ordinance itself, there is a case to be made that this is not structurally sound and it's not economically feasible to restore it. You know, before I get into that, I just want to touch on something that Mr. Rebecki stated earlier. I know we brought it up at the outset of this application, but I just wanted to be clear that you know, those principles regarding you know, other types of zoning board or planning board applications not being able to be brought after being denied, that's the same principle that we're operating under here. It's the doctrine of res judicata, and it's discretionary. Even when all 5 of the elements are met, it may be debatable where all 5 have been met in this case, but you know, even assuming they are, it's still within the sound discretion of the board whether or not to hear the application, because it's not a hard and fast legal rule. It's not a absolute bar under the MLUL or our ordinance. It's purely a policy and judicial/administrative efficiency mechanism that's been written in by the courts. So, you know, as we confirmed at the outset, this is fully within our purview to hear this, even though it's the same demolition application. We can still hear it on the merits here, and you know, I would like to make a motion to approve the demolition with the condition that the applicants provide the documentation of the insurance expenditures already paid. I believe Mr. McMahon said he already had that. But like I said before, I'd like that in the record to support this decision. So I would like to make a motion to approve the demolition subject to the condition of furnishing those documents.
Okay, but I understand in terms of time, but I think we need to give everybody else a chance to voice their opinion.
That's fine, and I made the motion, and then it can be seconded and deliberated on.
Okay, okay.
Well, I think that we should, we're not there yet. I think we should have a little bit more of a discussion.
Right.
I don't agree with that at all. I think it would be a horrible precedent for this board to start approving demolition of contributing buildings, many of which are of similar construction all over town. And I haven't seen any numbers to confirm what's being discussed here. I feel for this couple and what they've gone through. It must be terrible. But, you know, with my work in New York City, buildings are gutted and retrofitted and rebuilt all the time. The exterior envelope of this building is intact. I am not convinced that in order to make it asbestos free or encapsulate the asbestos, that all the joists and beams need to be ripped out and the whole building needs to be pulled apart. I believe there must be a way to do it, and I think Mr. Connolly has pointed out that he's worked with buildings in the past by, you know.
So before you continue, we have a motion on the floor. I think we have to continue, right? Mr. Karasik, with the motion that's on the floor, is anyone not willing to second it or?
Second, if somebody seconds it, it doesn't change the fact that everybody's going to discuss the motion and either support it or not support it, depending on their opinion. So it doesn't, you know, it's perfectly appropriate for the member to make the motion. And it still gives everyone the opportunity as Ms. Levy did, to express their opinion and to
I,
vote
I
against.
think typically it makes sense to go around and hear what the commissioners have to say
Right.
before we start.
Well, that
voting.
has been the typical practice, but there's no, at least legally, there's no bar with the motion. It's in fact often often the case in commissions and boards. There isn't a discussion until there's a motion. That hasn't been the practice at this commission. So I
We
don't want.
usually discuss things first, so we can let the motion, I don't know what the technical term is, or does someone have to second it, or do we?
Motion to approve the application, I think, is what I heard.
Yeah,
Someone would have to
someone
second
would have
it.
to
but it's gonna
second
be-
it, and then we can go into deliberations or a vote. But my reasoning for this is it's 9:40. This is the first application. I'd like to focus the discussion. So I want something concrete on the table for us to talk, so this doesn't just spin out of control.
Kathleen, when do we get, are you going to assign each of us an opportunity to speak?
Yes, I'm just trying to David, yes, everyone will have that opportunity to speak. I'm just trying to figure out, because we haven't done this before, we normally have discussion before we have a motion, so.
If nobody's seconded it at this point, anybody could have seconded it, no one has.
Right.
So I think that if you want to give a moment of silence for people to have that opportunity, you can do that. I don't hear anyone jumping.
I will second it.
Who is that?
Steve.
Okay,
I will
with,
second it because this is not unlike a building hit by a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake, that it cannot be rebuilt as, for a variety of reasons, maybe a lot of structure. This one happened to be something that was very much like going down a rabbit hole, and it was not stopped. So you've got total, you know, the whole place has been infested with asbestos, which is very, you know, it's unfortunate, but I don't think that this would prevent this building from being totally demolished.
okay, thank you. Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I agree. I think that you could see why the applicants fell in love with this home. I don't see any indication of intent on their part to have caused any damage to this house. I think that it's a very unfortunate situation that their first contractor acted the way he did to cause the initial spread, but I don't think that's the applicant's fault. And I don't think the subsequent issue in their bathroom, the pipe bursting, is the applicant's fault. I think they've tried, based on the record, I think they've tried their best to salvage their home that they fell in love with initially when they purchased it. And I think the fact that we're dealing with asbestos here, the fact that it's permeated the entire house, that the way that Mr. Beck described the process of actually trying to restore this house, the labor costs of that seem extraordinarily high. So I think this is not a run of the mill. So I think this is not necessarily a run of the mill case of just allowing and permitting somebody to demolish a historically significant home. I think weighing and balancing the interests, it favors the applicants in this case. And I think it's unfortunate to lose such a beautiful structure, but I think balancing the interests, I'm in favor of the demolition.
Okay, thank you. David? David, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first and foremost, I have a variety of questions and points to discuss, but needless to say, I do not support this application.
Okay, thank you.
Well, David, now's your time to discuss it.
Okay, well, I have many things to talk about. First and foremost, I would like to ask the applicant, on on the premise that if,
No,
I believe questions are over though, aren't they?
We had
This is
opportunities to ask
discussion,
the applicant.
David.
Yeah, we have to discuss
Right.
our opinions now.
okay, well, I think it's without knowing, since our concern as a historic preservation body is to consider the streetscape and the property in the context of the community, we have no concept at this time. There was nothing in this application that indicated to us what is the intent of the applicant. If in fact a demolition was to be granted, what conditions would we require to mitigate the impact on the broader neighborhood, historic neighborhood, and the adjacent properties? So that's something that hasn't been addressed at all. The second thing is,
I'm happy to address that.
well, hold on. I'm not sure if you're allowed to. Are you, Kathleen? I was just told, can she address that?
We've had this discussion before with another demolition, and no, that's not something that I give it back to Jason that this is not something that we're here to discuss whether or not to allow the demolition based on criteria that it is a historic house within an historic neighborhood.
But isn't a mitigating factor what would be presumed would be placed in kind in its place? Wouldn't that be a mitigating factor? I would think in good faith to come up to us for a second time, the same application with no material variation between the first application and the second. It's the second bite of the apple, and I can't speak to the legalities of that, but to me, it doesn't, I understand it's at our discretion, but I would think as a gesture of good faith or something as a means, there's been no effort to sell the property. It's already been stated. And there's been nothing to show us that there's been any consideration in terms of our concerns for the historic district, in terms of what they propose to build. So based upon those two things, we're basically looking at the exact same application, which we've rejected prior. And the only difference between the last application and this application, to my knowledge, was the physical presence of the applicant. And the fact that they chose not to be there the first time, that was their choice. And that might have affected us the first time, but I don't know. This doesn't seem kosher to me. I mean, if our concern,
well, that's a good point, David.
Engineering reports.
I can't hear you.
I don't specifically asked for.
What's that?
We didn't have engineering reports in the last go round.
Right.
And that's something we specifically asked for, and now we have it, and we have testimony.
There's no
testimony.
There's no material representation of what will be built in its place if it was to be demolished, and there's no effort, which our ordinance requires, to make an effort to sell the property in good faith. Both of those things,
I think that
would be mitigating factors.
Required under the ordinance to put a building application as part of the demo permit application.
Right, David. There's not part. Your point about that it hasn't been offered in good faith to be sold. That is a point. Do you have any other points of discussion?
Well, I do think that we need to go back and amend our ordinance to make sure that the 200-foot radius, or whatever the radius of neighbors, should be notified. This is no different than any variance application. In fact, it might even be more severe. So I think it's a gross omission to not require members of the immediate adjacent properties to be notified. So I would bring this to Ira's attention as a proposed amendment to the ordinance.
Well, I hear, Madam Chair, I hear you, David, and but I think it's very important. I understand there could be some changes. It's important to recognize what pertains to this application.
No, I understand that.
As far as the planning department's concerned that accepted the application procedurally met all of the requirements in terms of notice. So it can't be brought against the applicant. That
I'm not bringing it against the applicant. I brought it up to bring it to, because this.
No, I appreciate that, and I hear you. The second thing also, that also goes, by the way, for the issue of what's going to be built. That isn't one of the criteria. And if in fact this is an historic district, or if in fact they need variances, what will happen is that this application for whatever they're going to build there, under most circumstances, will end up back here anyway, at least for consultation, because it's a historic district. So that's the whole discussion we had with the last application.
The idea
as
of
to what-
conditions, so basically, just as,
But
it-
you
just
can't
as,
condition
hold on, just as,
this application on what's going to get built there. That wouldn't
just-
be appropriate condition.
but why? Why couldn't that be, why wouldn't that be an appropriate condition if the consideration is the preservation of the historic quality of the neighborhood?
Ira, that's not how it's done, David. We can't ask. I think your points are well founded, but it's not our purview to ask what will be built there. We will be able to review that it's. Did you just say why?
I just think, yeah, I think it makes completely no sense whatsoever to, if the consideration, the primary consideration here is maintaining the integrity of the historic district. Well, I think if they're asking for such an accommodation.
That wasn't part of it wasn't required of the applicant, and it's not part of their application. So
Okay,
do you have any other discussion points?
Hold on, then I think that should be viewed materially against the application.
But hold on now.
That's
Now,
exactly-
the applicant
That's
said
exactly what
they
I
built
was
that
saying.
house.
Excuse me, that's exactly what I was saying that you can't do. You can't draw an inference or
Right.
against the applicant because you don't know what they're going to build there. That's impermissible under the circumstances.
But if we have discretion, which you've said to us, you use that very specific word, if we have discretion to even hear the application again, right?
No, David, we have discretion to hear this application on the merits. We don't have discretion to change the standards for our review. That's governed by the ordinance.
Or to have impermissible.
Well spoken.
So we're going to make a decision based on economics and hardship and really have nothing to do with
We
it.
will be voting on it in a few minutes. So if that's the end of your discussion, Caroline, do you have anything else to add to
No sense.
your comments of before?
I think David's points are well taken.
I can't hear you, Caroline.
I agree with David, at least about the effort to sell the property.
Okay.
And I would, yeah, I would definitely want to see what's being put back, but you heard how I feel about it.
Okay. All right. And I go with Mr. Conley's recommendation that the intrinsic value of the house and based on where it is in the neighborhood, I think that it is a structure that should remain. I understand the economic hardship. I think that from the get-go, things just fell, it was like a snowball effect. But I do know, and I believe that both of the experts testified that it could be rectified if using the proper methods. I understand it'll be difficult, especially hearing from Mr. Beck, but I would tend not to support the application for demolition. So does anyone have any further points? Otherwise, I think we should go to a vote.
Yeah, I just wanted to add very briefly, the fact that we are constrained by what's before the record, and what we have in this record is testimony from two experts, an environmental remediation expert and an engineering expert, who both testified, and then I believe in Mr. Beck's report, he stated that it would be economically not feasible to restore the property. And at this stage, we don't have any competing expert testimony or conclusions to indicate that it is feasible to restore. I mean, what we have is, well, I think it can be done, or it's been done in other circumstances in other places, and that to me seems a little speculative and a little dangerous, especially when we're talking about setting a precedent. And I think based on what's been put on the record, I mean, the bar's pretty high on this application. They've spent more than half the value of the home already, and that's not getting into further demolition, further rehabilitation, and then trying to rebuild on the existing frame rather than building from new, which is substantially cheaper. It's much cheaper to knock down a house and rebuild a new house rather than try to demolition piecemeal and then rebuild. And that's in the testimony of the experts. So I just want to point that out.
And I think we should be careful. Oh, sorry, Jason, you done?
No, go ahead, I'm done.
Yeah, and I think we should be careful of setting the precedent of can it be done and putting that burden on our neighbors, especially when they have not acted in a way that that demonstrated any intent or negligence or recklessness in regard to their property. So I think we have to be very careful of what precedent we're going to set here, and especially given the gravity of the infestation of asbestos in their home. I think we really need to consider that, and that these applicants don't appear to be acting in any way other than in good faith.
I think the precedent is just as strong in the other direction, and I think that it's a very dangerous precedent. After the storm that we just had and there was flooding, let's say people can now argue that their house is no longer structurally sound because they don't have flood insurance, and because of that, it's cheaper for them rather than to fix it. It's cheaper for them to knock it down. So then they come to us, and we have a precedent there.
David,
we went through insurance.
David, that's a different situation.
No,
They have insurance. They had insurance. The Maranuses had insurance.
Right.
So and they've exhausted it. I mean, this is not a simple case of, oh, there's damage to my home. You know what? Let's knock it down and create a new one. I think they've been through an extensive process to try and bring this home up to to restore this home. It's just a very unfortunate situation. I don't think they should be punished for that.
I haven't heard an expert testimony provide information that would confirm that the insurance payment has been, fully, there's nothing here to say that the insurance couldn't have paid for the full replacement value of the house.
But that's why Jason made it as part of our resolution, that we want that proof. And then if that is proven out, then we approve the demolition. Right? I mean, I think that's a fair compromise.
I just know I renegotiated my homeowner's insurance and I have replacement value of my home.
Okay, David, I think we're ready to go to a vote. Agreed, Jason?
Yeah, I don't have anything further. And if no one else does, I think we should call a roll call vote.
Yes, let's call a vote.
Can I just ask, would it be possible for us to hire an engineer to look at it as an independent or that someone else look at it? I mean, this engineer has been hired to prove that the house can't be saved. I think we should have someone independent looking at it.
But isn't that why Mr. Conley reviews the reports?
Yeah.
But he's not an engineer, he's an architect.
Oh, fair.
But I mean, we have town code officials, we have town engineers, the resources are there prior to the application to gather that information.
Okay, well, I don't see any numbers being presented, so.
I think.
May I just say one thing? They keep talking about the red tagging of the house. Of course, it's red tagged in its current condition. Doesn't necessarily mean the house can't be retrieved, recovered. It's just in its current condition. So let's not interpret that as being a final statement on the condition of the home. It's the condition of the home in its present state.
Sure, but then we heard testimony from Mr. Beck and Mr. Higgins about the hardships of restoring it to to its livable state, and we have to weigh whether after exhausting their insurance, if that is proven out, David, after exhausting their insurance, now they have to bear that cost as well, and it could be exorbitant. So, and I know, Carol, I understand your point. We don't have those exact numbers, but Mr. Beck and Mr. Higgins testified that it would be extensive. It would be extremely expensive.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Graham. Jason, you have a motion on the floor to approve the demolition It was seconded. And what were the condition? The condition was,
That they provide the proof of the exhaustion of insurance and the expenditures that they've already made.
okay. And now we'll go for a vote, call a vote now. I think we've heard all the testimony and had discussions.
Yep, Chair Bennett,
No.
Vice Chair Heineman,
Yes.
Mr. Rooney,
Yes.
Mr. Greenbaum,
No.
Ms. Kane Levy,
No,
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
It's 3-3.
How do we break a tie?
I don't.
You don't. It doesn't.
It doesn't
It
pass.
fails. The vote failed.
3-3, the motion fails.
Next
So
application.
So it's basically denied.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. But you have grounds to appeal. Now, I guess make sure it's within the 20 days that you.
Absolutely.
They're
Okay.
aware of it.
Okay. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you for the time.
Okay.
Good luck.
Now, it's 10:01. The next one on board is, we're not going to get to the 3 applications tonight, but the next one maybe we can get to, which is the HPC application of 211 Bellevue Avenue. It's the application for facade changes. This is a certificate of appropriateness.
Yes.
Who's
For,
here?
as
hold
subject
on.
properties within the Upper Montclair Historic District, and it's existing 1931 2-story building.
Kathleen, Kathleen, can I make sure that there's somebody here for this application?
Oh, sure.
So, so I don't want to. So, who is here to represent this applicant? Is it Mr. Robertson, Mr. Jarzembowski? Who's here?
No, this is,
Ryan Robertson, can you hear me?
Okay, so you're here. That's what I thought. So you're here representing the applicant. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure there was somebody here before we
embarked on it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Janice. So this is an intrusive property within, listed in the Upper Montclair Business District, Historic District, and nominated on, described on their nomination floor. The applicant proposes to renovate the exterior of the existing structure. We did look at this also once before, and the applicant is returning to us now with what looks like some changes to what you proposed last time. So who do we have on here for the, Mr. Robertson, and who else?
It'll just be me for this one.
Okay, so Mr. Krasik, could you swear in, were you sworn in that last time?
Yeah, but I believe, Janice, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a separate application number, so I probably have to be sworn in.
This is a new application, so you need to be sworn in.
Okay.
You solemnly swear the testimony going to this commission is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And just identify yourself, please.
Ryan Robertson, address is 8 Hillside Avenue in Montclair.
Thanks so much. Good.
Thank you. Shall I begin, Ms. Bennett?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, as the chair mentioned, we have previously submitted the rear elevation of this project. So Janice, if you don't mind, could we start on page 4, because that is where we left off. I'll try to be as brief as I can, because I know we've just endured a long application here. But I want to give a little background just to jog everyone's memory for everyone who was here, because this has been a few months. We had a previous application here in May. We presented drawings just of the rear, which is the north elevation that has the glass roof that you see in detail 1. You might recall that there was some significant water problems. So we wanted to solve that. And then at the same time, there's texture 111 siding that's very poor condition on the second floor of this building. It was delaminating and was probably contributing to some of the water. So we wanted to take the opportunity to propose an upgrade to the second floor. Brief history about the building. It was built in the 30s as a one-story bank. Sometime in the 70s, the second story was added. I think it was originally stucco, but at a later date that we don't know, this texture 111 siding was added. And as I said, it's in poor condition everywhere, especially at the rear. But at the time, we just proposed it at the rear with the idea that we were going to wrap it around the whole building. At the prior hearing in May, we proceeded with a vote to approve this rear application, or the rear elevation, with a condition that I would be presenting the other 3 elevations. So that's what I'm doing tonight. And at the time, there were 3 conditions of approval that were given. One was to change the spacing of the standing seam on detail 2 there, so that it would be 2 feet instead of 16 inches. And that more closely matches the spacing of the ribs on the glass. So I've made that update. This is your first time seeing that. We were asked to submit cut sheets, colors, and samples to be reviewed by the review committee. I did submit that to Graham Petto on June 23rd, and I know he's no longer with the township, so I don't know if that got submitted to the review committee or maybe not. Janice, I can work with you offline to make sure you have that. I can re-forward it if needed.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, no problem. And then the third condition was that we were going to hold on reviewing the cornice, because as you can see in detail 2, there's a gutter, the roof pitches back here, and really all you're seeing is the sides of the cornice. And we wanted an opportunity to look at it with you on how it looks on the other elevations. So that's what we'll be looking today. And then the 2 notes in red are also some minor changes that we've added. The one to the right, where it says extend thin brick at parapet wall, that was after realizing that the building's at the property line, so we can't really run a cornice there. So we're going to run a thin brick parapet. That's a 3.5-foot alley on that side of the building. And then the other red note is we added some small decorative precast blocks just because the facade looked pretty blank above the new roof there. So that is a new element that you haven't seen, which you can deliberate on. So just to recap this north elevation, there's a reference photo 4, which I presented last time too. That was kind of our takeoff for the materials that we were going off of. We have a red brick that exists here now, and we liked the idea to add a lighter colored brick above with a decorative banding and a cornice. So that's was kind of the starting point for this design. As I said, we widened the standing seam bays. Previously, Mr. Connolly gave us a recommendation to simplify the string course and to simplify the cornice, and both have been done in these drawings, but I see that he has the same comment again, so we can talk about that in a little more detail. And if you scroll down, I have a streetscape there of the front, which we'll go to the front elevation next, but here you can see there's that 3.5-foot alley in between our building and the next, and there you can see that the cornice doesn't wrap, doesn't project into the alley. And then off to the right, there's a driveway that takes you back into the municipal parking. Okay, so now we can go to sheet 1, and this will be the Bellevue Avenue elevations. And there's no proposed changes on the first floor, as you can see between detail 1 and detail 2. We have the same string course that you saw in the rear that you approved in concept, I guess, but maybe there's discussion about the detail of it. But there's the same string course there, but in this elevation, it's separating the new thin brick on top from the limestone surrounds that we're not altering. So down below, we have glass storefront with limestone. Here we're proposing to separate that with the fiberglass string course and then thin brick above, light gray thin brick, and then our proposed cornice. There's 2 signage attachments that are on the building that we're proposing they'd have to come down, but we propose to just put them back in place. And then here I can address some of Mr. Connolly's comments that came in the report from this week. As I said, he still had a comment about our cornice. That was his comment number 1. A less decorative string course and cornice should be considered, noting that an accentuated cornice is more Victorian. So as I said, the one you're seeing here is simpler than the one we showed the first time. And the string course I feel is very simple, but I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on that, and to see what you think of the cornice that we're proposing. We'd like it to keep this one, but if everyone objects, we would certainly reconsider. His comment number 2 was the soldier course above the windows. Oh, I should just note all the windows are to remain throughout the whole building on the second floor. It's really just surface changes. His comment was to extend the soldier course by 1 or 2 courses to the left and right of each window. And I agree with that. I think on this front elevation, though, we should just run it straight across, because so at the left, go 2 bricks over, but then run it straight across, because between windows 1 and 2, I think you may as well just continue it there. There's not much. There's just a sliver left. But I agree with Mr. Connolly's comment, and I agree with his comment number 3 to change the sill to like a row lock, so it's thinner. I like that idea and agree with that. His comment number 4 was to provide cut sheets and samples and colors, which I mentioned we've already done, but I'll resend to Janice. His comment 5 was to just double check the existing drawings with what's really there. So I know at some point the applicant had changed the windows, and it seems like they're slightly different. The opening size is the same, but you can see in that photograph that maybe the 2 windows flanking are a little skinnier and they have wider mullions than what I'm showing. So we can update the drawing, but as Mr. Connolly pointed out, we're not proposing to change those windows at all. They'll look like they do right now, just with thin brick and thin brick treatments at the sill and header. And then his 6th comment we'll look at when we look at the east elevation. So I think we can go to page 2 now. Oh, actually, before you go to page 2, just this photo at the bottom, if you can focus in on there. So that is looking at the east elevation. And that is his comment, is that gutter. If you keep in mind that little gutter below the core fire banner, and there's a leader that comes down. He was suggesting that we take a look at like I'm proposing to keep it kind of how it is, and he's saying to reconsider. If you were to zoom in, I don't know if this photo will do it.
I was just going to ask if Janice, if you could zoom in. It's very difficult to see.
Yeah, sorry. And even zooming in, I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but that roof leader or that drainage leader does not empty onto a splash block or the sidewalk or anything. It empties back into the building. Oh. So that is one reason why I'm reluctant to address number 6 from Mr. Connolly's report, because, you know, everything we're doing with this application is on the 2nd floor. There's an existing retail tenant, and if we were to move, you'll see when we look at the east elevation, we have pilasters and new columns up on the 2nd floor, and I thought it would look nice to bring it to the left and bring it down, but we need to repenetrate, and that is happening above 1st floor, finished floor. If it was happening in the basement, that might be easier, but I think it'd be intrusive to that retail tenant. So now we can go to the next page. Yeah. And so here you see in the existing east elevation, there's that texture 111, which is in bad shape on the whole 2nd floor. And we're proposing the same thin brick that we're proposing on all the other elevations, the same string course below that, separating the full existing red brick and the cornice above. The cornice is separated there for the sloped metal roof above the balcony, and that would be the same material and color and spacing as what you've previously approved at the rear elevation. And we're calling for new 12-inch square columns at that balcony instead of just the thin, flimsy columns they have there. And they have just that texture 111 as a guardrail, and we propose to get rid of that and put a wood rail instead. 2nd floor windows here again would remain on this elevation, just like all the other elevations. And we would make the same updates to the header and the sill that Mr. Connolly recommended, and I agree with his comment. And there's that first floor storefront window, which we saw in the photo below, and there you can see the drain pipe emptying back into the building. So you can see the impact of kind of keeping that gutter how it is. I think it works now, and I think it'd be easiest to leave it that way, but we can discuss when I open for comments. And the only other thing to mention on this elevation, I think that is kind of an interesting detail that will interest you, is there's one portion where the thin brick will meet the existing brick, and you can see it kind of at that angled part at the rear where there's the terracotta coping. So our intention is to install the thin brick so it's flush with the full thickness red brick. And then the question was, how are we going to treat that? And then we've decided to install a thin metal channel that'll be painted to match the grout color. I think that's the simplest way to handle that, that detail. And we can go to the next page. This is the west elevation. So this is if you were standing in the 3.5-foot alley, if you could see everything. There you can see there's existing brick on detail 1 below, and there's texture 111 above. And it's basically the same thing. We're proposing the string course to separate the thin brick, but at the top, we would return at the Bellevue Avenue elevation. You see the cornice, and it would just have to return flat and then be a thin brick parapet so that we're not overhanging past the property line. And again, the same updates to the windows I would make, and they're in the distance where you're seeing the cornice off to the left, because that's back in the distance. Let's see, is that all my points here? I was trying to be as quick as possible. That is everything. So in conclusion, we think the first floor of this building is attractive and suitable to the neighborhood. What exists on the second floor, though, is, in my opinion, detrimental to the charm of Bellevue Avenue. And we believe that what we've proposed is a welcome upgrade to this portion of the building, the portion that's less attractive and is complementary to the rest of the building and the neighborhood. So we hope you agree, and we welcome your comments and questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robinson. Do we have any questions from our commissioners? Mr. Greenbaum, would you like to go first? Questions? Mr. Greenbaum? Ms. Kane-Levy?
Do you have any information on the brick that you're proposing to use and how it relates to the existing brick at the first floor? Do you have a photograph so we can see the contrast? Or are you intending to match it?
Oh no, it's not matching. It's going to be a thin brick instead of a full brick, and instead of red brick below, it'll be a lighter gray brick. So,
oh well, do you have anything rendered? Any picture renderings with color so we can see what the gray brick would look like?
Right. There's the reference photo, Janice, on page 4 of the building that we used as a precedent study, kind of. And we previously, when we reviewed this rear application, we had kind of a colored rear elevation that was just kind of matching that. So right there, it says 2 proposed north elevation. We presented that. You can see where the string course is. Below that would be red to kind of match the color. The color in this reference photo is very close to the color of the building now, the first floor. And what we're proposing above would be very close to what is in this reference photo.
Another question, Carolee?
And what is the material of the cornice?
Fiberglass.
Okay. Mr. Hyman?
No questions.
Mr. Graham?
No questions.
Mr. Rooney?
No questions.
I have a question. Is the dimension of the brick that you're proposing for the top floor the same as the dimensions of the existing brick?
Yes, and the same pattern as well. It's a common bond.
Okay, and is there any other material besides fiberglass that you can use for the cornice, or is fiberglass what's used in the field?
Yeah, I think there are some others that the company we've selected does fiberglass. That's just the one I selected here, but there are others. Trying to remember.
That's concrete.
Polyurethane.
Just wondered if there was a different material, that's all.
Yeah, there can be other materials too, but it would be painted. It would look the same, sort of a matte color.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
You forgot to ask if I have any questions.
I did ask you, David. You didn't answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. May I ask my questions now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so 2 questions. Did you consider, first of all, maybe somebody asked this, the string course on the right side of the building I'm looking at right now?
Yes.
Assuming we're all seeing the same thing. On the back of the building, why doesn't that string course extend unless there's a projection?
Yeah, there is a projection, Mr. Greenbaum. And I'm sorry, I know for a fact you weren't on May, you were excused in May, so you didn't get to see the first presentation I gave of the rear. But Janice, maybe if you go to page 1, you can show Mr. Greenbaum the footprint of the building, and it'll explain. There's the survey.
That's the, I'm trying to zoom out. So that's the front we're looking at.
You were just looking at the rear.
No, I was looking at the rear. Just my question was about that, the string course on the rear.
Yes.
As a means of unifying the 2 sides. Because I'm looking at a plan, I'm sorry, I'm looking at an elevation, I can't really tell where the projection is. So if we can go back to the rear drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered why the string course didn't extend the full length.
Yeah, if you go back to that elevation, I'll explain. So what you're seeing where the string course is back quite a distance. I don't know the number of feet off the top of my head. And then you're seeing a metal staircase, and then it will return towards you.
Okay.
Until you see the terracotta, and then there it doesn't come across. So maybe Janice, if you go to page 3, we'll show David the view from the alley, which there you see the stair, and the string course does pick up again. But then it will terminate in that same thin metal reveal that I have at the opposite elevation, because that's the only place where thin brick will meet real brick.
Do you, just out of curiosity, do you have a plan? Is there a drawing of the plan so I can just see it, make sure I understand it?
There's just the outline of the plan in the survey drawing that I was referencing on page 1. I don't know if that'll help you.
So wait, that view we just looked at with the staircase, that is looking at it from the driveway side?
Yes. If you zoom way into number 4, please, Janice, on that first page. Maybe it'll help him. He'll see the staircase.
I see the staircase. So that's the driveway going back towards the auto repairs.
Yeah.
Brian, you want page 1 or page 4?
Page 1, the survey.
Oh, the survey. Okay.
Yeah, just zoom in so we can see the stair there.
Yep.
Is that on the
sorry.
right? Have to scroll. Yep, there we go. I can see it.
So
Okay,
you
so-
go ahead.
Okay, I see. Now I understand. So it's
Okay.
on the inside. That's the inside elevation. Got it. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I understood that. Did you consider any kind of reveals in the form of instead of just being a flat face of brick, any kind of corbelling or any kind of
Three-dimensionality.
yeah, some dimension. It bothers me a lot when, especially in this case, it's the back of a building, but it's really part of the public thoroughfare. And I sometimes it's nice to have the pilasters, something that and even on the, I guess on the front, it's hard to do because you're trying to build off the ground floor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have we have some different coursing. So there's the soldier course at the top,
right?
Lock at the sill. There's another row lock just underneath the cornice, and the corbelling you can't really do with thin brick, right? Because it's only a little over an inch thick. So you could do it just a tiny bit, but it wouldn't quite be what you're thinking, maybe.
But in the rear, could you not do some kind of surface interest to create some kind of
Surface treatment, yes.
Yeah, to create like a, whether it's a pilaster, something to create a rhythm as opposed to the flat facade. It's just,
We felt the same way after we saw. Well, so first of all, the rear was approved.
Right.
And after we drew it, we decided kind of maybe what you're saying is it felt pretty blank above the sloped roof. So we proposed to add a couple decorative blocks, which those can certainly be projecting because they're going to be precast and they can come out a full inch if we needed to. And it'll cast a shadow and it'll be interesting. But yeah.
I just think it would be much nicer, this back parking lot. First of all, I mean, I grew up in this neighborhood and I've been in that back parking lot, and there's no reason that the back can't have a front facing,
feel to it.
I mean, there's no reason that it has to be thought of as back of house. If it's one thing, if it's facing like to the back of a train track or something of that nature, but this is part of the public thoroughfare.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have entrances there. So,
well, I think your point is well taken, David. But if there isn't any other questions, we'll move on. Do you have another question, David, or?
No, but the only other issue I said, you asked about fiberglass. There's also cast concrete. You asked the applicant before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is the possibility of cast concrete.
Sure.
So.
Okay. So we're finished with the. Just in terms of time, would like to continue to move forward. Janice, can we open this up to public comment from the phones?
Yes, I don't think we have any public, but I've opened up the public. Any comments?
Janice, I think Mr. Higgins is still on from our last discussion as well.
Oh, yes. Yes, he is. I'll move him.
There you go.
Leave that. I'm not done yet.
Shouldn't they have?
All right. So there's no comments.
Okay. Thank you, Janice. Tom, would you like to go over your comments, your memo, please? I know that Mr. Robinson has addressed I think everyone except the one number 6, rethink Plainmus. Well, he did address it, but was his explanation of moving to your?
Yes, that was fine. I was unaware that that lower leader entered the building. I thought it spilled that grade. So I think that's fine. It seems to be working the way it is now. It just seemed odd the way that whole gutter and leader situation was set up.
Right.
But my biggest concern
Is the
still
cornice?
has to do is the cornice. Yeah.
Right.
I think a more simplified cornice would fit in better with the architecture of the district.
Okay, thank you.
Did they consider possibly going to a terracotta coping, like similar to what's on the slope part of the rear of the building? It will kind of tie the whole thing together and fit within the time period.
We did not consider that. Our jumping off point was this reference photo that's on the screen now. Once we thought about red brick and we thought, what are we going to do on the second floor? And so that was our starting point. But you're right, that terracotta is it's nice in the back, but it's kind of not connected to anything. So it would be a nice opportunity to connect it, but it isn't connected now either. So.
Well, let's look at Janice, if we can look at the front elevation drawing. The lower drawing in particular, the proposed, the cornice just seems odd to me now that you have to not have it project into the alleyway. It just makes the whole elevation look unbalanced. And so if it was simplified, it would kind of solve that problem. But but thank you for addressing pretty much all the comments.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll open up for comments from our commissioners. Mr. Graham.
I have no comments.
Okay. Ms. Kane-Levy?
I agree with Mr. Connolly about the cornice. And I think like a terracotta coping would be a really good solution and would just simplify it a little bit. I know you drew reference from a modern building, but you know, if you look around Montclair and just the two-story commercial buildings that exist, they don't have cornices like this. A lot of them are just treated with corbelled brickwork. And so I think a simple terracotta coping would be something, you know, with the dentilled brickwork underneath would work pretty well.
Thank you. Mr. Hyman
I don't have any comments.
and Mr. Rooney.
I have no comments.
Mr. Greenbaum?
I would like to see, can you go back to that picture to the right on the rear part of the building that you used as a reference? And you'll excuse me because I wasn't here for the first part of the application. So is the rear settled? That was voted on and determined and approved?
Yes, except for the
Yes.
corners.
Except for the corner. So basically, there's no point in me making any further suggestions on that?
Well, don't say there's no point. We'd like to hear what you think.
Well, I mean, again, if you look at your reference photo, that's a perfect example of the kind of pilastering dimensionality that I'm referring to.
Right.
You know, what's also interesting too, as a side note, is the cornice on this building is more kind of an arts and crafts. It has a projection, a projection with console brackets. That might be something to consider in the front. You know, combining terracotta with a kind of a projection. But my most important concern, I think, is bringing dimensionality to the back. And if there's a way to create a rhythm and some shadows, verticality, you know, very much that reference photo.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, David. They did get approval for what is back there, and this is a certificate of appropriateness, so we should really concentrate on the other facades that concern what we're going to be approving tonight. So do you have any other comments for the other facades?
So the only other facade, we're talking, the main facade is the front facade. So let's go back to that real quick. I just want to make sure I have no questions.
No comments.
Comments, I'm sorry. So yeah, I like the idea. I'd like to, in your reference photo of that projected roof, whereas my colleagues didn't like the kind of the cove cornice, maybe something with a projection and a console that follows a rhythm with the window divisions might be very nice. Again, using that reference photo that you provided.
Okay, so are we, with this certificate of appropriateness, is everyone in, we will take a vote, but what we've seen with this photo, I mean, with this presentation, we will necessarily agree, be in consensus with what I'm hearing is just with the simplified cornice as a condition.
I would recommend that they motion be made to approve the brick cladding and the changes to the facade and to work with Mr. Connolly in consultation with Mr. Connolly to restudy the cornice.
Okay, great. So you just made a motion? That's a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Second the motion?
I second. Steve?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Oh, should we vote on this? Oh, sorry, we're in favor, but I guess we,
I think I should do a roll call. Because we do record the vote.
yes,
Okay, so Chair Bennett,
yes,
Vice Chair Hyman,
Yes.
Mr. Rooney,
Yes.
Mr. Greenbaum,
Yes.
Ms. Kane Levy,
Yes.
and Mr. Graham.
Yes.
Okay.
That's with the condition that it comes back, yes?
Or is it just revision committee?
The revision committee and Tom.
She said work with Tom on the cornice.
Okay, Tom, are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
yes, and we, the revisions committee will be looking at the samples of brick that you've dropped off. We haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, the matter, I guess, due to the time, the next thing on the agenda is the referral from the Board of Adjustment for 17 Watchung Plaza. How do you feel? I think, is it too late to start this? We do have Tom's it's a recommendation. It's not a certificate of appropriateness. We could send his recommendations, if everyone's had a chance to read them, to the zoning board.
Okay, I made Mr. Silver and Mr. Jarzembowski panelists just so that they could answer whatever questions you may have.
Okay, sorry, let me just get my. So is everyone, commissioners, in favor of going forward with this application?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor. It's quick.
Okay, great. As long as we're all in agreement. So as I mentioned, this is application, it's a refer from the zoning board, application 2760, 17 Watchung Plaza, known historically as the, was it the National Bank of Montclair? And we have a proposal to, hold on, sorry, I have to get all my things. This building is in the Watchung Plaza Business Historic District. It was built in 1923. It is known as the Montclair National Bank or the Montclair Trust Building. I did a little bit more research on this only because it became so fascinating. The architect was John F. Jackson. He's a notable American architect who did a number of YMCA buildings in Passaic, Jersey City, Garfield, Brooklyn, Elmira, New York. He also did the Masonic Temple in Westfield. And he did the addition to the church, the Presbyterian Church of Upper Montclair, the Parish House Church. And in a weird kind of symmetry, the builder of this building was, the builder masonry was a company called Carlson Company, Building Company, Oscar Carlson, who was the son of Ludwig Carlson, who was the builder of the Lutheran Church, which we're going to see next week on Glenwood Road. So I thought that was a really nice kind of symmetry. It is considered, as I mentioned before, is within the Watchung Plaza Historic District and is identified as a contributing structure in the 2010 district nomination report. So Janice, who do we have here to speak to this?
We got Robert Silver, the developer, the applicant, and Rick Jarzembowski from Sionis Architecture.
Okay, great. Mr. Krasik, could you swear them in, please?
Certainly. Would you both raise your right hands, please? Do you solemnly swear testimony you're going to give this commission is the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth? Hello?
Hello, are you there?
You need to turn your microphones on. Rick, I see you're on.
Yes. Okay.
Bob, I don't see your microphone on.
Hello? Are either of did either of you hear me?
Yes, I heard you and I say yes.
Oh, okay, great. And that's Rick.
That's Rick, yes.
And how about Bob? Where are you?
Well, Bob's here. He just doesn't have his microphone on. Nope, there we go. We should hear you now, Bob.
Okay, great. And I do, Ira. I swear to tell the truth.
Okay, well, it's good. It's better than the alternative.
Janice, if I could take a moment, and Miss Bennett, if I could take a moment and introduce this case, and then,
yes.
And I know time is of the essence. Rick will give the details, but I think I'd just like to set the table. Janice, if you could go to the first slide, page 2. For those that don't know you, I am the founder of a company in town called the Bravitas Group. All we do is repurpose vacant, empty buildings. We have, for some reason, fallen in love with 1920s bank. This will be our 5th bank job, as they say, 1920s, repurposing of banks. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Vault 491 at 491 Bloomfield Avenue. This team was also responsible for converting the Investor Savings Bank for the Montclair film. We don't own it, but our team repurposed that. And then our most recent bank projects were in Caldwell, Grover House, and the Wilson. If you've ever been in Caldwell, the Wilson was painted a garish green on this beautiful limestone, and we've brought that back to its splendor. Janice, if you could go to the next slide, please. And the other non-bank jobs in town are Academy Square, the former Catherine Gibbs School. Probably my favorite project was the repurposing of the Christian Scientist Church at 8 Hillside Avenue, Hillside Square, where we were able to keep the church within their home and then repurpose the rest into boutique office spaces. And then the last project is Greenworks on Grove, which is the first LEED certified project. It was a former World Pottery, and before that it was an Esso gas station. We were very excited when Chase decided to close that branch. I've been in town since 1988, a frequent shopper in Watchung Plaza. As Rick is going to demonstrate, this building facades have been mucked up since 1925, and we plan to bring the facades back to its original splendor. And Rick's going to go through that in detail. What we propose in our zoning board application is that we have a single tenant Montclair speech therapy. She started her business at Vault 491, outgrew that very quickly, and now is located at our 2 bank buildings in Caldwell, Grover House, and Wilson, and she's outgrown that. And also, Montclair speech therapy in Caldwell doesn't have the same ring. And Lori and Ben, our residents, have built a tremendous business, and they will serve primarily 75% of our client base are children, and the other 25% are adults that have some kind of speech issue. and she's kind of a Pied Piper with these children. There will be approximately 19 consultants that will be providing these services. And on the first floor, there'll be a small retail component where they will be selling skills-based items to their clients and, frankly, the outside. So with that, at the lateness of the night, I won't drone on. I prefer, if it's okay, Chairman Bennett, if Rick could go through the application and what we plan to do to this building to enhance it and bring it back to its glory. And then Rick and I can answer any questions that you might have. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your comments. They're much appreciated. Then we have Mr. Rick now.
Yes, okay.
Take it away.
I'll try to be as brief as I can.
Hey, Rick, your head is off screen, so if you're a handsome man, so we'd like to see you.
Okay. It's late. Okay. Yeah, I shut off my monitor. All right. Okay, just quickly, the property's at the corner of Watchung Plaza and Fairfield Street. It's a brick 2.5-story building. The main entrance is from Watchung Plaza. There was an ADA ramp constructed at some point, which is at the rear of the building and is accessed from Fairfield Street and the parking lot behind the building. That parking lot behind the building is on the property of the bank building. And then behind the parking lot, there's an access to the Montclair public parking lot, behind Watchung Avenue. Okay, next slide, please. This is the existing conditions, photographs of the existing. The west elevation faces on Watchung Plaza. The east elevation, you can see the ADA ramp and the parking area behind. And then where those cones are, that's the driveway to the municipal parking lot. And the south elevation faces on Fairfield Street. Next slide, please. This is a corner view looking northeast where you can see the front facade facing on Watchung Plaza and the side facade facing on Fairfield Street. And you can see a portion of the parking lot in the back with that dumpster exposed, just sitting in the parking lot. Next slide, please. This is just a general overview of the area. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Again, the subject property is on that corner of Watchung Plaza and Fairfield Street. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan. Still, the main entrance is from Watchung Plaza. The ADA ramp remains. The parking area is restriped to provide 11 parking spaces. Previously, the parking spaces kind of bled over into the town right away. So now they've all been put within the property. Some landscaping has been added and the landscaping that's there is being removed. Also, a street tree is being added on Fairfield Street. And then that dumpster will now be in an enclosure with a roof. Next slide, please. And this is just a detail of that site plan. Next, please. These are the floor plans. There's a lower level, first floor, second floor. It's basically consultant rooms and supporting and administrative areas. On the first floor at the main entrance, there will be reception and a retail component. And you can see the ADA ramp with that rear entrance. Also, a Lula elevator is being added to provide ADA access to all the floors. Next slide, please. At the second floor on the north side, there's a large occupational therapy room. And that room, the ceiling will be removed to open it up to the underside of the roof, and a mezzanine office space is being added in that attic area. And over the occupational therapy area on the rear of the building, we're proposing 2 skylights. Next slide, please.
Isn't it the same one?
You went back and forth. Yeah, next one.
Okay. That's
Thank you. This was the only historic photograph that we could find. So if you can go to 2 slides ahead, and I'll describe that on that slide. Okay, so in the upper left-hand corner is the historic photograph. On the upper right-hand corner is the existing condition now. And in the lower left-hand corner is the proposal.
Can I interrupt just a minute? Janice, I sent you a photo earlier today. Do you have that?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, we didn't see this
I
one.
found this in the Montclair Times. I just thought it might add to the discussion. That's all, the 1925 or 23.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the existing condition is that the original windows were replaced with single width metal and vinyl windows. The west and south first floor windows were shortened and a brick panel installed between the first and second floor windows. And you can see that in the comparison to the original or historic photograph. The original panel doors at the front entrance were replaced with shorter aluminum storefront doors with a taller transom panel. The original front steps that came out straight towards Watchung Plaza were replaced with a center landing and steps to the north and south. And the original lampposts on each side of those steps were eliminated. So our proposal is that all the windows that exist now, those metal and vinyl windows, will be removed. The brick panels between the first and second floor windows will also be removed. The first floor windows will be lengthened. You know, the sill height will remain the same, but the head will be higher from 8.5 feet to 10 feet. The second floor windows shall be lengthened from 4.5 feet to 4'11". A composite panel and trim is proposed between the first and second floor windows. That panel height is approximately 3'11". The sill height of the second floor windows would remain. That seems to be the historic height that they were. The new window groups will be 2 or 3 units wide to match the original windows. The first floor window shall be 2 units high to allow for 1'10" of second floor structure. Seems like the original first floor windows went all the way up to the second floor. So you can see in this nighttime photo that the upper portion of the first floor windows are dark. We haven't been able to do demolition to see exactly what's remaining there or what, you know, was there, but we're allowing for about 1'10" of structure for the second floor. And that's why our panel between the first floor and the second floor is a little bit taller than the panel that's shown in the original window, original photograph. Yeah, to allow for 1'10" of second floor structure, you know, that's why the panels are a little bit bigger and the windows are a little shorter. The original windows were 3 units high with the upper unit in front of the second floor structure. The mutton pattern of the proposed units match the original windows. Now, the 7-foot-high aluminum storefront doors and transom shall be removed. The proposed doors shall be 9-foot-high aluminum-clad wood doors with a 4-panel pattern to match the original doors. But these doors, the panels will be glass. If you go to next slide, please. Okay. And then on the south elevation, the window on the west corner matches the windows on the west elevation. The other windows are the original openings, and so those will just be replaced. On the east elevation, all the windows will be replaced in the openings that are there, which appear to be the original openings. The first floor windows now have metal bars on them, like security guards, and those will all be removed. And the door that's accessed from the ADA ramp is now just a flush steel door with a vision panel. That will be removed and be replaced by a panel door similar to the front door. And then you can see on the east elevation, on the roof on the right side, where the two skylights are proposed. There's no changes to the north elevation except the replacement of the window. Next slide, please. So these are the signs that are proposed. The first sign is at the top of the building, where originally it was inscribed in the stone, Montclair National Bank. That's been covered by a board, that's there now. And the proposal is to leave that board and put the new name of the building, the National, in individual letters on that board. The second sign is over the front door, and that would be a tenant identification sign. The third and fourth signs are on the chamfered corners of the building, and those again would be tenant identification signs, and they're projecting signs. And then the last sign would be over the rear door, again, just a smaller version of the sign that's over the front door. Okay. Next slide, please. So this is a current photograph of, the nighttime showing the existing lighting. And our proposal is to remove those two floodlights on the pilasters, remove the floodlight over the front door, and remove those two gooseneck lights. There was a sign there at one time, which is no longer there. Next slide, please. So the proposal is to provide 4 up and down lights on the pilasters, an up and down light over the front door, which would highlight the landing in front of the door, the sign, and the up light portion would highlight the existing clock that's there. And then at the top, that whole cornice would be illuminated by a linear fixture. Slide, please. So this shows the 4 facades with the lighting. So on the south facade, again, at the cornice, there would be linear lighting continuous. And then that same type fixture, which is about a 1 inch by 1 inch fixture, would also light the pediment. And then there would be a downlight over that side door. And on the rear, there are 3 lights that would remain to light the parking lot. And those are between the first and second floor windows. And then in addition to that, 5 low-level downlights would be added to illuminate the ramp area. Next slide, please. This is just the light schedule. Lights type A and type B are the lights that would be removed from the front facade. Light type C is the existing 3 lights that light the parking lot. And then type XBB1 and XBD1 are the up and down lights and it's on the pilasters. And I think the XBD1 is just the downlight that's on the back. The XSU1 is just that 1 inch by 1 inch continuous light that lights up the cornice and the pediment. And XBD2 is the light that's over the doors. So that they're all very minimal, small fixtures. Next slide, please. So this shows the streetscape along Watchung Plaza. We have the existing 2.5-story brick bank building next to the 1-story retail building. And on the Fairfield streetscape, the building that's next to the bank building is the side of the 1-story retail building. And then, in front of that retail building is the parking lot and then the municipal lot. That's the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. I have a quick question for Janice. Mr. Robertson testified to a number of lighting and signage. Will that come back to the Minor Applications Committee for approval? Because
No.
that would be a C of A.
No, it's all part of the application that's pending before the Board of Adjustment. They have a couple signage variances that the Board of Adjustment will vote on as part of this application, and the lighting is part of the site plan application. The Board of Adjustment can condition, if they do approve this, they can put in a condition that the HPC approve the lighting. They've done that in the past.
Okay, I just wanted some clarification. Thank you. Any questions? Why don't we start with Mr. Hyman?
No questions.
Mr. Rooney?
No questions.
Mr. Graham?
No questions.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
Yes, I'm just curious in looking in that historic photo, that was it originally a 3-story building, or with a it seems like the first story windows had a panel, or oh no, it was glazed. Okay.
It was always 2 stories.
It was always okay, and I see a glazed panel there. Now that we have this very good clear photo, would you consider adjusting the windows to more closely meet what we see here?
We are meeting it pretty closely. The only thing that we're not doing is basically on those first floor windows, we're taking out that middle section. Because the windows that are the original windows went all the way up to the second floor level. So the windows are actually in front of the floor structure. You know, for lots of reasons, including sound and being able to get mechanicals and that, we would rather not have those windows go all the way up to the second floor level. We'd rather have them stop at the first floor ceiling level.
Okay. All right, and then also, given this very clear photograph, the issue of the color of the windows, which was pointed out by Mr. Connolly in his report, typically it would have been a lighter color with this, I don't know, neo-federal colonial revival building.
Miss Levy, I didn't hear the question. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, now that we have this very clear photo of what the original windows looked like, and it's evident that they were a light color, would that be something that you would be amenable to?
Yeah, I think that, you know, and I'm, you know, Chairman Bennett, thank you, because I've been looking everywhere for a great photo, and this is very helpful. And it's, we actually went and scraped the windows to go back to the original. On the south side upper windows, they are original. And that just happened this week, and it clearly was white paint that had yellowed over time. And so, yeah, after seeing this, after doing our sample, I think we have to go back and address the window colors.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Bob, just to clarify, there are no original windows. There was just some original trim, and that's what we scraped.
Okay, thank you. And that was going to be my question. Considering looking at this photograph, that the color would be more appropriate with this very beautiful building. So
I think that's a very good point.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more, Mr. Greenbaum, did you have a question?
No, at this point, the only concern I had was just the number of signs. Not that I have an aversion to it, but I believe there's ordinances that restrict the number of signs, and I just want to make sure that maybe Janice could comment on that.
They are seeking variances for the signs.
I see. Okay.
And can I confirm one more thing about the windows? I didn't look at the details too closely, but they are a muntin on the exterior, right? It's not a behind the glass.
That drives me crazy too. No, it will be a true mutton with a detail on that yes, it will not be buried between glass.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions from the commissioners, Janice, can you just see if anybody from the public wants to chime in?
Ryan, do you want to chime in? We have one member of the public. I've unmuted you.
No, thanks.
Okay.
Oh.
Just
no comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we'll just open it up for discussion to the commissioners. Mr. Hyman? Any further comments
No,
for
nothing.
recommendations?
You know, I'm generally in support of this application. I like what they've done. I think it fits with the character of the original building.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rooney?
Yeah, and I agree. I think I would like to see the windows go all the way up to the second floor, but I think you're going to have a fire safety problem there. So by the use of the panels above the first floor windows, it doesn't detract from the original design at all. It looks great.
Mr. Graham?
I agree. I really I love what they're doing with the windows and restoring it to the historical heyday. So I think this is a great project.
And Ms. Kane-Levy?
Yes, I really appreciate the work that went into this, and it's very well thought out. It's going to be a beautiful project. And in terms of the color of the windows, I don't think a stark white would be right, but for instance, I believe the church that you did the conversion, is it the Christian Science Church?
Christian Science, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's an off-white color or something that approximates what the limestone is on this building. Or there's another church on Park and Claremont that has a paint scheme that sort of draws from the limestone. It's a similar palette.
And I think Mr. Conley brought that up in one of his comments too. So we'll certainly take that back.
Yes, and I'm sorry, thank you. Mr. Conley, I'm sorry. Would you please go over your comments? I'm sorry,
Sure.
It's getting late.
Yeah, well, the window color we already talked about. That was my comment number 2, but I would like to read my comment number 1 because I think it is important. So what I wrote was the windows are an important aspect of architectural character and are often the most dominant visual element. In the property survey form from the district nomination report, which quoted an article from the Montclair Times that was dated June 20th, 1925, which was also noted by Sionis Architecture in their PowerPoint presentation that was uploaded to our website. The quote reads, while the structure actually has 2 complete floors, the treatment of the long windows is such as to give the effect of a single room of large dimensions. Right. So all efforts should be made to reconstruct the original historic appearance in pattern and size while accommodating the new use. So consider redesigning the windows to more accurately restore the original appearance of the building. The fact that, the architects went through so much trouble to try and make this appear as one floor with what they did with the windows, I think is really important. And just the fact that if you look at the historic photograph, the way the windows were divided up with the 3 sections on the lower window, I think is really, really important. If we're going through all this trouble to restore this building, the windows are probably, again, one of the most dominant architectural features of this building. That being said, Janice, if we could look, I had a concern about the lights that were shown. If we can go back to the I guess there are 4 bank projects that they showed at the beginning of the presentation. I think one of them, yeah, that right there. The number 1 vault 491, it looks like. That looks like a photograph that was taken at night. The cornice looks completely washed out to me by lighting, and I don't want that to happen on this new project.
I think that's really bad photography, but if you saw how the Wilson is lit at night and Vault 491, it is very subtle.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I take your point.
Yeah. Okay. Just pay attention to that. That's all.
Mr. Conley, can we go back to the window detail where it shows the side by side, the slide where it has the historic, it has the 3 views.
Which number was that?
That's number 14, Janice.
Okay, good.
There we go.
So, Rick and Mr. Conley, it looks like the middle 2 windows have a much broader panel than the flanking south and north windows. And I think our window pattern really on the middle windows mimics the original. The north and south do not. Is that fair?
That's hard to tell.
No, I don't think that's right.
Yeah, let's go to the
Montclair Times photo.
The width of the openings is the same. It's the historic openings in terms of width.
But it looks like you have 3 separate sections in the lower window, right? And you all.
Yeah, historically, yes.
Yeah.
Janice, can you put the Montclair Times
John
Bennett's photo back up?
Yep.
Is it an illusion that the middle 2 are different?
No, they are
different. Are different. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Wider.
The one reason, Mr. Conley, I like Rick's drawing of the existing is when we've tried to put a false panel behind a window, the illusion, especially at night, is not very attractive to me. And
so are you going back to the original ceiling height?
We are. And this, Rick, how many panes would be covered between the floors?
At least 2.
And that's why we treated it that way.
Yeah, because in the original, the head of the window basically is the second floor. The head, yes, right there.
So you're saying the head of the window is the floor of the second floor, not the underside of the floor.
Yeah, because the sill of the second floor window is 2'1".
Right.
So that whole panel that you see right on the historic photo is above the second floor.
But it worked in the past. Why couldn't we get it to work again? We have much better technology than they had back then, right?
Right, but I guess at some point, somebody thought it didn't work.
Well, buildings were changed in the 70s, right, for all kinds of crazy.
Mr. Conley, we'll take it very seriously, and we'll go back, and as soon as we demo that and see the heights, I think we'll have better information too. So let us take it under advisement. I hear you.
Sure. Okay.
Tom, you're referring to the 2 horizontal cross members on the lower window, on the first floor window?
Well, their proposed head height is different from what you see here, and the vision of the windows is different, right? There are 3 sections to these lower windows. They're proposing 2, and their overall height is different.
I just want to point something out to you that you can't see right now, but I'm going to turn my camera on for a second and see myself, hopefully. I'm using my proportional dividers, architectural proportional dividers, and looking at the elevation, the design of those muttons and the placement of the cross members correspond to the golden ratio. So there was actually a proportional, a geometrical thought process to where the horizontal cross members are in the form of the elevation. So it was actually a conceived rationally conceived, deliberate compositional element.
In the proposed or the historic?
No, in the historic. I'm only adding it as a piece of interesting fact that by me using my dividers, I'm just saying, so there was actually an aesthetic, compositional, and I bet you this entire building is built on the same proportional system. I'd have to go back and look it over.
Possibly, but it's again a moot point because it was here, so I don't care how they designed it.
No. I'm saying the original. What you're saying, I'm supporting what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, but it doesn't matter how they came up with it. It's there. It was there.
It's an aesthetic. That's all. It was an aesthetic, deliberate aesthetic decision. It's not arbitrary.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
all. For those who appreciate, for those who appreciate and understand aesthetics and
No,
architecture.
I agree with you. Yes.
Okay, I think it's an important thing to at least bring to people's attention. Many people might not even be aware of these types of systems of proportion, so I thought I'd share that with you.
Thank you, David. I think that what Mr. Silver has said is that they will reconsider the overall size and placement of the windows. Correct me, but I think that's what you had just said.
Yeah,
Chairman Bennett is exactly what I said.
And all I was trying to do is to, all I was trying to.
David, I was just going to say, please, I didn't mean to, I realized I didn't let Mr. Conley speak, so you have the floor, please.
No, I just want to, my only commentary, since I wasn't given that opportunity before, is that this is one of my favorite buildings in town. It's a true gem. And I'm very happy it's in capable hands. And I greatly appreciate it. I know from a commercial real estate point of view, it's a bit of a tricky building. And I'm glad that you found a use and a tenant that could make use of it in a way that serves, justifies the preservation and the enhancement of the building. So I'm appreciative of that. And my only reason for bringing up the issue of the architectural proportions is that there is a whole sense of a whole system of composition that many people, even who study architecture today, won't learn about. And this building adheres to a very fine standard of proportionality. And it would be nice to honor that and reflect that. That's all. And if you're not aware of it, it's just something to appreciate about the building.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. Well, I think we're all, it sounds as though everybody is generally in agreement. I think it's it will look fabulous when it's done. I think some of the recommendations would be about the window color and also about revisiting the size and proportion of those large window openings on that first floor. And then my only other concern was about the signage. But if that's a variance that you're going for with the zoning board, then who knows? It may or may not come back to us. So are there any other conditions, Janice, that you wrote down, or were those recommendations? I'm sorry, recommendations.
My recommendations were all site plan issues that were addressed in this, in the revised plan. Let's see.
So I mean recommendations from the HPC going forward to the zoning board. I listed 2, which was the size and proportion of the windows and then the color of the windows.
I think the color, what we're trying to say is that the color is more than likely a precise reflection of the color of the columns and the limestone around the building. It's following the same scheme.
Okay. I think we've thank you very much. This looks like it's going to be great.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see.
Chairman Bennett, I appreciate you staying up so late to hear our case.
Thank all of my fellow commissioners. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Now, just the last thing on our agenda are the 2, where are they?
Resolution
Okay.
The only thing that I have about that is on the second page, it has 4 approved and 1, I think it is
Is this the right one? Yeah, this is it.
right.
Hold on.
I thought it was the vote. I thought there was a vote.
Not a vote on this.
Oh, no, you know what it is? There is a vote. I'm sorry. In the
The minutes.
it has a vote for 4 approved and 1 voted no. And I think that should be reflected in this. Can you find the minutes, Janice? And just add that.
Yep, the minutes say 4-1. I can put that right here under the commission decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, great.
And I wasn't there for it either, so I guess I should abstain.
You can vote. All right, so can we have a motion to approve this resolution as amended?
Motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Mike, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. So any other, I think we're ready to adjourn unless there's any other issue. Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion.
Okay, and who's second? I didn't hear all that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Glad we got through it all.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome. Good night.
Thank you, Ira.